Okay, good morning. Welcome to the Thurston County Board of County Commissioners Planning Session, Thursday, October 14th, 2021. My name is Ty Minter, Chair of the Board. To my left is Vice Chair Commissioner Gary Edwards. To my right is Commissioner Carolina Mejia. We have County Manager Mira Chavez and Assistant County Manager Robin Campbell. Public can follow along on this planning session through our YouTube live stream. We are scheduled from 8:30 to 12. There'll probably be a break right in the middle where we'll stay on the same session, video session. So with that intro, let's get right into it. Our first item this morning is the 2022 legislative agenda discussion. Unless we want to change the order. No? Okay.
So thank you, Commissioners. This morning we have Deborah Manguia join us. So to begin the conversation, obviously during our plan session, there's not a set time, so there's an opportunity to have a conversation with the board. And I will ask Deborah to give you, the board, a perspective how they passed the 2021 legislative session went. Some of the highlights, which probably you already know, some of the key highlights affecting the counties. Then we'll move into the suggestions that we will have attached in your packet as to what elements you may consider as part of the 2022 legislative agenda for the county. And lastly, we'll have a conversation with the board as to how we're going to start reaching out to the legislative delegation. In past years, we have hosted in December a larger breakfast here with the legislative delegation, where it has given us the opportunity to present our legislative agenda. Last year we couldn't do it due to COVID, and I don't think this year is going to be appropriate to have an in-person. So Deborah and I have been talking about some strategies as to how we can slowly start reaching out to some of the legislative delegation, and that will probably conclude that portion of the item number one. Any questions on that, Commissioner?
No.
Okay, Deborah. Good morning.
Good morning, everyone. And sorry I can't join you physically, but I appreciate the opportunity of talking with you today. As Romero said, I wanted to give you just a really quick high-level overview of some of the things that happened last session, and then we'll get into some of the other elements of legislative planning. It was a 105-day biennial budget session. They did end on time. They passed operating, capital, and transportation budgets. It was primarily a remote session, and they operated, the majority caucuses operated on 4 major themes: COVID relief, economic recovery, climate action and resiliency, and advancing racial equity. And they did a tremendous amount of work in those 4 areas, as well as did some other things too. Some of the really big things that they did were they passed a capital gains tax. They did they funded the working tax exemption, which was something that was created over a decade ago, but it was never funded. They passed approximately a dozen laws around police accountability, police reform. They passed a couple of really big bills and a bunch of other bills around climate change, including cap and trade and a low carbon fuel standard. They responded to the State v. Blake decision and changed penalties for drug possession. They banned the open carry of guns at protests and on the Capitol grounds. They funded at $130 million out of the operating budget, wildfire prevention and forest health. And then they put over $1.5 billion into affordable housing and homelessness. And so if you have any questions or want any more detail about any of those, I'm happy to give that to you. But that's just a quick snapshot of some of the big things that they did during this last session. In terms of the budget, the state, fortunately, I'm sorry?
No, it's just if the commissioners have questions. But
Sorry, Deborah, go ahead.
Okay. In terms of the budget, the state received over $10.5 billion in federal stimulus money. They did not allocate all of it because the state has until 2024 to spend it. I'm still waiting for clarification from OFM on how much is unallocated that would be available to the legislature to allocate in the next session. But some of the big one-time expenditures they made were they put over $1 billion into stabilizing K-12 schools. They put over $1 billion into public health. They put over $500 million into childcare grants, $500 million into unemployment insurance benefit. In the capital budget, they appropriated $6.3 billion and they reserved $82 million, which is a small number, but they reserved $82 million for the supplemental. And I've also heard that they're looking at potentially, excuse me, some creative ways to maybe increase that just a little bit. They did put $715,000 to Department of Enterprise Services for Capitol Lake Long-Term Management Plan. They put $175 million into the Housing Trust Fund. They put almost $27 million into the Fish Barrier Removal Board, $327 million into the Public Works Board. And then in terms of transportation, they passed a budget that basically just kept the wheels on the bus. They did not pass a new revenue package. There are discussions between the House and Senate on potentially where the new revenue would come from and what projects would be on that list. There was talk earlier this year of a special session. At this point, it doesn't look like there might be a special session, but we never know for sure. But they are going to continue those discussions. And of course, the state wants to see what the federal government will do in terms of infrastructure as well. They did take $1 billion, they did get $1 billion from federal ARPA money for transportation, and they put $400 million of that into the fish passage barrier removal. And they have an emphasis on alternative fuel vehicle charging and green transportation capital grants. And so, and then they provided $1 million to the State Patrol to address bills related to police tactics and use of force and that kind of thing. Both the low carbon fuel standard and the cap and trade bill, when the legislature passed them, were linked to a 5-cent gas tax for an increase for transportation revenue. The governor did veto those sections. And of course, the legislature is challenging the governor's authority to do that kind of a veto. So we'll see what happens with that. But at this point, the Senate has their new law transportation package, which is called Forward Washington. It's a 16-year, $17.8 billion investment plan. And the House has their Miles Ahead plan, which is also a 16-year plan, and it's a $22 billion investment plan. So we will be watching that and providing input into that as they move forward on that. On the county level, the county.
Dara.
Yes.
All right, I think there was questions, and
Oh, okay.
Commissioner Edwards, you were first.
I do have a question about, are they working on a fix for that state income tax that they passed that goes into effect in January that, I don't know, it's 0.058 or something, where the employee has to pay into the tax?
Long term.
Long-term care, I guess. Well, it's really a state income tax, though. I think it'll be challenged at some point, I hope.
Because the income tax he's referring is on our ballot
No,
this November.
I'm referring to the point.
Long-term care.
Long-term care. That's what I'm referring to. I refer to that as a state income tax because I feel that's what it is. But so I know that's not politically correct, but I'm never politically correct. So I'm not going to start today. Anyway, any fix going to be coming on that?
Yes, they are working on that. They're talking about that. They know that there are some issues in terms of implementation. And they're also, so it was a huge policy decision that was made along with the police reform policy decisions. And so they're working on fixing the glitches on those and providing clarifications. And so we should see something very early. In fact, they were talking about a special session also to fix that because it's supposed to be implemented starting January 1st. And so we'll have to see if they're going to do anything during committee days during that or not. But yeah, they are working on a fix to that.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Robin had a question.
So you mentioned, Deborah, that the state received infrastructure money from the American Recovery Plan Act. We've been waiting to see how counties can access that state allocation. Have you seen anything on that yet?
So I mentioned two things on that. I mentioned that the federal government sent $1 billion into our transportation budget. And then I mentioned that we're waiting to see what happens at the federal level with the infrastructure package. So you're talking about the money that's already come into the state?
Yeah, from ARPA, the infrastructure money out of ARPA. There was a large part of the federal act that was infrastructure, not the recovery fund.
I have not heard, Robin. I will check into that and I will get back to everyone on that one.
Thank you.
In addition to that, I believe there is a significant amount of money at the state that can be distributed as part of the American Rescue Plan.
Well,
And
that's in addition to.
in addition to that, so,
Right.
and that is also, we would love to hear, what are the means and methods, how they planning to distribute that? Because I think they're waiting to the next legislative session.
Some of it has,
Yeah.
but a lot of that, we've already started to see how we're going to get it through public health and the Department of Commerce. But it's that's all part of the recovery fund. I'm talking about the part of the federal act that was specifically for infrastructure, not the infrastructure bill that hasn't passed yet, but there's infrastructure money coming into the state. We want to know how to access that.
Okay, I will follow up on that and I'll get back to you. Okay, were there other questions?
Not yet, keep going.
Okay.
Thank you.
So in terms of the county's priorities for the 21 session, one of them was maintaining the judicial impact money. It's almost $2.2 million for the biennium. We got that increased and we wanted to make sure that that was maintained. I'm still not exactly sure how it happened, but somehow it wasn't put into the carry forward. And so we were able to catch that early and we were able to work with both the House and the Senate and the Administrative Office of the Courts and get that restored so that the county continues to see that money. And then the county also, yeah. And, a big shout out to Representative Dolan also, because she sits on appropriations and that's in the House is where the big issue was. And so she was great with that. And then also the county, a specific priority was around fiscal flexibility. The state did pass House Bill 1069, which is just a short-term fix to some of the funds that the county has access to, but it's not really the kind of fiscal flexibility that we're looking forward to. And we can talk about that as we talk about planning for the 2022 session. In the 2022 session, it starts January 10th. There's still a question as to whether or not it's going to be another virtual session or if it's going to be a hybrid session. I heard that as of October 18th, any legislative staff that has not shown proof of vaccination will have their key cards disabled and they will not be allowed on campus. But they will make provision for them to work remotely. It is scheduled to be a short 60-day session with a focus on changes to the budget. However, as I mentioned before, they are going to be taking a look at clarifications to some of the bills that they passed last session. I anticipate that they will also continue to look at new transportation revenue, that there will be a continued focus on COVID relief and recovery, affordable housing and homelessness, and also climate change. As a reminder, any bills that were introduced in the 2021 session that didn't pass will automatically be reintroduced in the 2022 session. So we'll see those. There are no legislative elections this year. However, Senator Jeannie Darnielle, who's the chair of the Senate Human Services Rehabilitation and Reentry Committee, did announce that she's resigning. So we'll have a new senator. And then as an FYI, Senator David Frost announced he's not running for re-election. So we'll have him next year, but then in 2022, we won't as a senator. And so with that, I'm happy to take any questions, or Romero, if you want, we can talk about the 2022 draft legislative agenda.
Any questions about what happened in the past?
I have a question in regards to the judicial impact fees. I mean, still with the 2 million, I am grateful, please do not take it wrong, as I am not, I'm still very grateful that we got the amount that we did. But I mean, when are we really going to see like a full figure of what the work that we're actually doing? Like, when are we really gonna get a true refund for the work that our Superior Court is doing?
Well, I will, I'll also ask Robin to jump in on this one, but I can tell you that the process that the county went through in order to come up with a number was extremely labor intensive. The courts and the clerk's offices had to manually record everything. And
So
Good job.
Deborah, I did that. I worked for the Superior Court, so
that's right.
I tracked the time. And I know
That's
how
right.
labor intensive it was.
Okay.
And just with all that time, it was still I feel like it didn't get the full picture of everything the courts do. And so that's why I'm asking the specific question on, when are we really going to see like a full figure of that?
So
And are we gonna have to go to that time tracking thing again to even?
if we want something more than just a inflation escalator, we're going to have to do everything you did and then some to document why we would need more money. I was surprised that they gave us anything more than the $1 million. They went up to the amount that we documented, and I think that we'd have a decent shot in an escalator. Wouldn't you, Deborah, with Chris Stanley backing us?
Well, yeah, so Chris Stanley used to be at OFM, and now he has placed Rams, sorry.
Ramsey Radwan.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Say that 3 times fast. And so he placed him, and Robin and I have already met with Chris and talked with him about this. So this is on his radar to make sure that we don't inadvertently get overlooked again in the next biennial budget, or that any reductions are taken during the supplemental on this. But I will share with you that we had some challenges in the House with the chair of appropriations. It took a lot of convincing to get him to even acknowledge the fact that the county should get any reimbursement for this. In addition to all of the tracking that the courts and the clerk's office did, we also looked at numbers from other counties that are similar in population size and number of judges. And we did a comparison of the state cases that they had. And in the documentation that we provided, we told them that it was a very conservative number, and then we felt that it was higher. But I think that Robin is correct, that if we're going to get a full reimbursement for the true impact to the county, we're going to have to provide more information. And honestly, I think that we might have to provide more information just to keep what we've got. So there needs to be some discussions about how we want to continue this and the dialogue with the legislature and what kind of numbers need to be produced to prove. Because when the legislature cut funding for that, it was actually the Senate chair that did that. And she wanted documentation to prove that we did in fact have a disproportionate impact because of the state cases.
I mean, I feel at this point, I feel like our best bet would be to get in touch with the Attorney General's office, because it affects their office the most. Because their office is the one who gets to come to Superior Court instead of sending their attorneys all over the state to kind of hear the cases all over. I mean, so that the impact is also to their office.
With all due respect, the Attorney General, while they support us getting the money, they could care less if we get it or not, because they will bring their cases to Thurston County, and we will be responsible for trying them, whether we get the money or not. They don't get any money out of this. So while they're a good ally to have, they're not going to go to bat for us if we're in a bad spot.
Yeah, even when the funding was cut to the county unexpectedly, the board at that time had these conversations. Why now the courts just put all the state cases on the back burner. And at that point, the judges couldn't find a way as to how you can put that in place, because it was not about the state being involved, but also citizens involved within those cases. That really was difficult to do. So a lot of conversation occurred during that time, and the way we went through is just going through the timekeeping, making sure that we log everything. And it was really a task, a very difficult task to get where we are. 2 years ago, we have in the law that it was the intent of the legislature to continue funding the court impact fees. And yet again, last year we have to lobby again to restore what we got.
Right, because they took it out of the base.
Yeah, so this is my words, very grinding every year as to what we need to go through
Right.
just to get what we got and what we believe we deserve. But you have a great point. It doesn't meet the overall expenditures that we go through with the state cases.
But just
We
to-
also know, though, we already know that the AOC is highly unlikely to put a proviso in the budget for this. We'll have to ask the legislature to add the proviso back in. And anytime you go to the legislature asking for someone, it's, you're rolling the dice on whether or not you get what you want or they take something away. But when we got this put back in a couple of years ago, I had suggested that we put whatever the cycle would be for the study into the proviso. The legislature didn't do that, but that would have protected us from them saying, we haven't seen another study from you, we're taking it away until we do, arbitrarily. I think we need to be prepared to do that study on a cycle and be able to say that.
I just want to clarify, I think I'm right, but correct me if I'm wrong, but this reimbursement doesn't rest on any legal foundation. Like the Constitution doesn't say the county seat will be reimbursed for extraordinary judicial fees. It's not in a statute. It's not anything. It's just really us saying it's fair.
That's right.
And they can do it or they cannot do it. Just kind of like what we did at lake management districts. You know, we're going to subsidize it because we think it's a good thing to do from a
That's
policy. But we don't have anything we don't have a lot of leverage legally to go, you know, like not like public defense where we say, oh, there's this case law that says unfunded mandates or, you know, whatever. I mean, we don't have any authority other than it's just fair because we're impacted. So we have to
Yes.
understand our leverage is
We're
kind of
just-
shaky.
We need to be able
However,
to show.
other counties are getting their full amount of a refund
No
through
other
state impact.
counties.
Well, Pierce County gets their full amount from Western State Hospital. Snohomish County gets their full amount from public defense because they're doing the, I forget the name, but they also get a full amount. But yet, I feel like we get the crappy end of the stick because we have to go through kind of AOC, and then that way we only get a percentage of that. Pierce County gets it through Western State Hospital. That's how they get their
How
state
they
impact
get their
fees.
what?
Their state impact fees.
For doing what?
Because they have to handle, they have a contract with Western State Hospital where they have to handle a couple of cases, and you're putting, I usually can talk about this, but today is not.
Right,
But
right,
yeah.
but it's for something specific and they have a contract with a state agency to provide a service. That's not how this works. This is an appropriation where the legislature is telling a state agency, pass this money through to this county. We're not doing anything to show that we're providing the service. We're just saying, hey, give us this money because you know we're doing something for you.
Well, it's in the
any-
legislator, right, that we have to hear these cases because we're in the state seat. So can't we just go back and ask for kind of like a provision in the law to be written saying, you know, because they are hearing these cases, they need to get like a full refund of what they're,
You could ask for that to be in the law, but again, I'm telling you, with all due respect, every time you go to the legislature, you're rolling the dice. When you ask them to do something for you, you're rolling the dice. You're gonna get it, they're just not gonna do anything, or they'll say, you know what, we're
Yeah.
gonna take this away. So it's.
I've got to jump in here. Commissioner Mejia, what she's talking about is a reimbursement for something taking place within Pierce County. Right, they do have a contract to handle all those mental health issues that take place with Western State. But if they didn't have that contract, they would still have to do it because those issues are taking place with people in Pierce County. And that's where the rub is. If we could get a contract similar to what is taking place in Pierce County for actual reimbursement, we would have the same benefit.
And I would wager with you that to get that reimbursement from Western State, Pierce County shows the number of cases, what those cases were, and the time spent on those cases, so they can get reimbursed. What I'm saying is Thurston County's not doing that due diligence to show the time we have. We're just saying, give us the money. If we
True.
were to do that due diligence, that is the onerous work that Commissioner Mejia, the court, and the clerk went through to get the funding that we have. If we were doing that every year, then I'd say that we had a good chance of going and getting a full reimbursement. But since we're not doing that at all, we're not even saying how many cases we hear. And they're still giving us the money.
Well, I do think
That's
we've said,
unusual in the world of accounting.
we've given them numbers to get where we are. We just need to expand. We need to expand on that, that's all.
We need to expand on that, and that is a huge body of work.
And I think it will be the next 2 years to go through this process, but it takes a lot of time and effort just to go through that, to justify that. So I think there is a lot to be done, but we have been successful so far in getting the money back.
Some
And,
money.
Well,
Not all money.
I think we got more.
The
than
money
what
we
used to
documented.
get. Yeah, money we documented, we got it. I know there is more to do, but how we can go approach the legislature, say, no, you give us this and we need more,
The
based
first-
on what?
The first year I was here, the request was 750,000. You're saying we've gotten that pumped up to over $1 million?
Yes,
Well, that's a 34%
that's a
increase
big
in
win.
of where we started just a couple of years ago. So I don't know, I feel like we're doing pretty good. And I was nervous about not having it, on the ongoing thing, because as Ramiro said, I completely agree. It's grinding to have this,
Grinding
to have to go through this every year, not knowing if we're gonna get it.
And Deborah has been always with the eye on the prize, every legislative session, just to make sure that nobody's gonna take this as an oversight purposely or not,
Right.
And I will continue to say thank you to Deborah, because really she has been on task on this one for the last 3-4 years, really.
Thank you.
Well, I'm sure she's more diplomatic than I would be if I was dealing with those bureaucrats up there,
I've sat with her in the legislative office, and she definitely is.
Yes, I know she is. I've been up there with her too. And thank you very much, Deborah.
I would love to bring Commissioner Mejia with me back when we go to talk to legislators about this. She can really help them understand that it's not a full reimbursement.
I don't know if
So-
I'll be as diplomatic either, so maybe not.
That's effective coming from another elected. What we do have a shot at though, and what I think that Deborah and I could have a conversation with Chris Stanley about, he would understand if we went in and said there needs to be some type of a escalator,
Right.
an inflation escalator. And we could, it's not a guarantee and it's too late to do it this year, but we could argue that a simple escalator wouldn't trigger a whole study. But if we want substantially more money, it's study time.
I think that even if we put an escalator in, that they're going to say, well, how do we know that the numbers are decreasing? I read in the paper, the case was transferred to Thurston County. So, and then we know that the Attorney General's office, they put clauses in contracts. State agencies put clauses in contracts that
It
say,
has to be litigated here.
right.
Yeah.
So then there was an element of ballot measures and the cost of those every few years that was part of the calculations. And so it's more complicated than just having a reimbursement for a contract on a contractual basis. But I do think that there needs to be some thought and discussion put into how do we track this so that we don't get blindsided and we don't lose this money and then have to rush and redo this whole thing all over again.
Right.
Okay, so now we're moving into the proposed priorities for next year.
So Deborah and I have been discussing some, in general terms, what would be a potential Thurston County legislative agenda for 2022. So we have provided you with a draft, a list. Obviously, when we get to the point of the board agreeing on what elements we need to include, I'll work with Megan just to put in the regular format that you're familiar with. So I'm just gonna let Deborah go through all the different items and maybe just stop on each one of them and answer any questions the board may have.
Okay. So the first one on the list is something that you had on your legislative agenda last year as part of the fiscal flexibility bullet. But this is specific just to the Veterans Assistance Levy and the Developmental Disability Mental Health Levy, and separating those out as separate property tax levies. This was an element of a bill that was introduced in 2019, I believe, by then Representative John Koster. He was a House Republican member. And there were other elements of that bill that were more controversial than this, but this element was also controversial with some members of the legislature, including some members of our delegation. And so basically what we would want is we would want these removed. Right now they're earmarked as part of the county's 1% lid restricted general levy, and we would want to remove them out of there and give voters an opportunity to increase that amount. And then so if those amounts were increased, it wouldn't take away from the other things that the general levy funds. It would result in a tax increase. And we know that especially Representative Orcutt and Senator Braun are not fans of new taxes. And so we would want to sit down with them and talk with them about this and see if we could get them to support this or at least be neutral would be good. I know that there are some members of the legislature that feel strongly about this. They're not in Thurston, they don't represent Thurston County, but we could talk with them and see if they would be willing to sponsor this kind of legislation. And I guess with that, Romero, I'll turn it over to you and Robin and see if and then the commissioners and see if there's any discussion on this item.
Well, I'll just throw two things out. One is Ramiro and I and Deborah had a conversation with with Eric Johnson at Wasac, and he kind of was just talking it through with us historically, and he was saying that we very likely might get a pushback about, we have to reset the general, I don't know the terminology, but if you're going to remove those two, then reset it so you're not getting you're not getting the tax increase of the extra capacity right out of the bat. You'd just be accomplishing the goal of being able to increase those others without it affecting the general. So that is what that is. Also, I brought this up twice at the Wasac Legislative Steering Committee meetings, and I think, Deborah, you were there once when I brought it up, and it's kind of like crickets in the room. I mean, I didn't hear, nobody seemed to be upset about it or opposed, but I also didn't hear anyone that showed any real enthusiasm or love for it either. So I'm just wondering kind of what your assessment of that is, because it seems like the kind of thing that if we don't even have Wasac kind of enthusiastically behind us, the group that's most directly would understand this and be interested in it, it seems like it's going to be a heavy lift. And I don't know what you thought about that, but I was getting the sense I was getting a sense of indifference from the folks that I talked to at the steering committee meeting.
So I was present in that meeting, and I remember one of the commissioners, I can't remember from which county, asked a question, led me to believe that they didn't really understand what it was that Thurston County was
Yeah.
forward.
I think that's what it is. I think it's a lack of understanding. I don't have a good understanding of how it's gonna work and be able to explain it to my constituents. So I think that probably is what's going on, just what you said. And I just want to point out, I think I talked to a lot of folks in county government around the state, and veterans are a topic that they want to protect those folks that need assistance out of the veterans community. Because quite honestly, if it wasn't for veterans, we wouldn't even be sitting here talking about our freedoms in this country. And I think that's highly recognized around the state. So in that education piece that goes on, we have to make sure we're assuring that it's not going to be detrimental to veterans. I think that's the biggest piece of it. We want to help others as well, but I think a lot of people recognize we wouldn't even be here if it wasn't for veterans.
Well, that's one of the biggest selling points of it, is that it could potentially be very helpful to veterans.
Yeah. But I mean, we need to get that word out.
Yeah.
Because right now, and you heard from a citizen, here recently, as to why we don't take the veterans fund out of the general fund,
Mhm.
because that's
Yeah.
part of the regular levy. And-
I'm not saying it's a bad idea.
But I think
It's a bigger education
you're
piece.
right, is the complexity of understanding this is tasking. Because if, and I think what you're hearing, if you have the general fund levy, I'm gonna draw.
Good,
Oh, you're gonna go to the board?
Yes.
it's
Can
complicated.
Deborah see the board when you do this?
Probably not, but she gets it. They're not gonna, so this is the general fund levy, right? And here you have two, is the veterans fund and the
No help.
medical,
I don't know how it's a developmental disability.
right? So that's part of the general levy. So the proposal is to take
And
this.
call that, just call that GL, because general fund confuses us and thinking you're talking about the county.
General levy,
This is the property tax.
right? And all this, as Deborah said, is subject to maximum of 1%. That's by state law. The proposal is to take those two and have the veterans fund here and mental health separate from the levy, right, from the regular levy. And that goes along with the rod fund levy, goes along with.
Conservation futures,
Conservation
The other funds
futures.
we have.
And medic one.
the little
Medic
strips
one.
of property tax that are
Those are
separate.
those are the four, well, six, property tax.
Yes, so, and the board approves individual levy increases every year as part of your budget.
We had to do the 4 resolutions when we
For
went.
each one of them. So that's what is the intent, is to have this separate. And as you know, each one has a specific purpose as to how the money should be spent. If we go to the veterans fund and the mental health, it will really create that specific purpose in which the money should be spent.
Can I point to
They
your board real
already
quick?
do though, I mean,
Right.
that's the thing. Even though these are subsumed in the general levy, there are laws that say how we can spend this revenue, so that's not a selling
Well,
point.
right, but it creates the flexibility in the future. It creates the flexibility in two elements, those two funds as well as the general levy.
Yeah, but if you look at your picture, so right now, if we were to increase the veterans thing, it would eat out of this box.
That's right.
Take it out, it could be increased, doesn't eat out of our box. So it
Exactly.
incentivizes us to increase the veterans fund. That's the selling point for veterans. What the anti-tax folks will say is, well, you need to reset, you need to, if you're gonna take those two out, then you need to take this bar and drop it down to here. So you're not getting this extra capacity just as a tax Like these would become
Taxpayers
additional
and paying
taxes
that much.
on our general. We get the ability to spend this money generally, which would be great for us, but it's effectively a tax increase.
And at some point, we did and correct me if I'm recollecting this wrong, so there's Delta was about 900,000.
No, it's 1.5 million,
How much?
1.5 million.
That's growing, okay.
There's about $500,000 that goes to the veterans and $1 million that goes to
So
mental health.
$1.5 million. In terms of percentages of the $46 million that we have, what is the percentage?
Small.
It's a very small percentage. So, but even if we take the 1.5 million and distribute it to all the property taxes across the county, the impact is so small.
A couple bucks.
Well, it's less than $5 a year for the regular citizen. And I know that I understand the perception for, some legislators that it's a tax increase. Yeah, in a way it is. But if you were to drop this, and just the regular levy eventually will grow to this point. So either way, I think is a good item for the board to consider. And I think as probably what Deborah was also stating, and Commissioner Edwards remember the House Bill 2006. That really was part of all this, but included a lot more stuff. That included eliminated the ceiling of the 1%, so it was a lot more stuff. In this particular case, it's narrowly focused to those two elements. Sorry you didn't get the chance to see the graph, Deborah.
That's okay. And I think that to do a good job of educating people on this. And I'll just go back to a bill that Thurston County ran in the legislature a couple of years ago, and that was the annexation bill. We didn't get a whole lot of interest from counties on that one either. And I did get WASAC and AWC to testify in support of those bills. The first year it didn't pass. The second year in the short session it did pass. Interestingly enough, the entire Senate Republican body voted no on that bill, but then the following year, a leading Senate Republican introduced another bill with the exact same concept, and it passed almost unanimously from the legislature. I'm about that one.
See, that was a successful piece of legislation that we worked on, yeah.
Yes, and it was really important. We worked on it, with the city of Lacey. Dolio was our prime sponsor, and Representative Griffin with his caucus. But my point is that nobody really, I think, understood that one that well either. But then when they finally did understand it, they were like, well, this is a great idea. So it may be the same with this one. If we can get a sponsor for this and get it out there and have some discussion on it. And the other piece of this is the Developmental Disability and Mental Health Levy. And so, I mean, you can think about, do you want two separate bills? Do you want to combine them? And then talk about the benefits to not only the veterans, but also on the DD and mental health and providing additional funds there.
And also the mental health option on this proposal could probably give an avenue to the legislature to address the impacts of the law enforcement legislation they had, because they had to be an intervention on site as opposed to law enforcement. So I think there's opportunities to how we can probably make an argument that as well.
I'm sure you're aware of the current town hall meetings on taxation structure that the state is currently holding. I happened to attend one last night. And it's either going to make this bill extremely difficult to pass because the state's looking at the larger issue of how to structure property and sales tax, or it would make it easy to just have this be a piece of some restructuring of the tax. But the public, anytime you start talking about taxes, annexations were not well understood, but they don't mess around with taxes. Here we're talking about a property tax where it looks like the average person is going to pay more, and we're going to get a lot of pushback. I'm just saying, it will not be an easy lift.
I agree, it will not be an easy one. And I don't have at least from my point of view, an expectation they will be going through this legislative session. But I think we need to begin the conversation, because it will take us a couple of years to get to a point of which the legislature will consider.
I think it would be more than a couple of years. Never.
And on that note, Melanie McAleenan from WASAC did meet with Representative Noel Frame, who's one of the co-chairs of that tax structure work group. And she did mention to her that Thurston County is looking at doing this. It was a very, very short conversation, and she said that Representative Frame just kind of went, oh.
Made a face is what she said.
Pardon?
She said that she made a face.
Yeah.
I was at that meeting too.
Yeah, so I'm mimicking what I think that face was, which was like, oh. So, so anyway, if we're going to do this, we're going to need to talk about having meetings with our delegation, especially since they were the most vocal against this last time, a few years ago, and we know that the whole tax thing has really heated up, given that some of the recent decisions that the legislature has made. And then also work on getting a prime sponsor, when I've got a couple people in mind on that one, so.
So
Are we-
what the board feels related to this item, hopefully give us some direction as to how we start populating the legislative agenda for next year.
Well, I think it's always worth talking about. I kind of go along with you. It's worth talking about because you aren't going to get it done overnight. You know, education is the key.
Right. So, okay, I see some nodding heads, so let's include that. Go ahead to the next item.
Okay. And then the next item, I'm putting a bullet in there about the county's partnership with the Nisqually tribe on broadband, and getting some additional state resources for that. We'll want to, work on the language on this a little bit more and provide some information about what amounts and what sources have already gone into this, and what amounts and what sources will be going into this, and how much we want from the state and what that will be used for.
And we have a formal presentation on broadband and the potential partnership with the Nisqually tribe, next item on the agenda this morning. So I think it's something that I believe the board is interested in pursuing, but whether we would like to, continue to lobby for the state, I think is a great opportunity.
Didn't they set up a program already? And I mean, because that's why we were like, oh, we have to form this broadband action team, otherwise we can't access this state program to promote broadband. So I'm just wondering if they've already set up a program that allows us to access, why are they going to be receptive to us asking for money outside that program?
Because you never know.
I mean, I'm not sure, maybe we could talk about it after we, to hear from the Nisqually kind of what the vision is and what the budget and stuff.
I guess going into that infrastructure money that the state is holding, maybe they'll be willing.
And if the
To
federal
invest
government
in.
passes infrastructure, I think how this item came is the potential partnership with the Nisqually tribe.
That may give us a leg up. I mean, I just know.
For sure.
I do know from the WASAC meetings that there's, like, we're not this isn't like judicial impact fees. Like, everywhere around the state are fired up about doing things like this. So it's going to be, we don't have any special, well, maybe if we have something, with this Nisqually tribe, it'll give us put us ahead of the curve. But
And we're ready.
Yeah,
I mean, the
that's the
fact that
thing.
we're ready to go is
Yeah.
gonna give us a leg up.
Right.
That's the leg up. Everyone else is just talking in
Shovel
the
ready.
planning stages. Like I feel like we're there and
We're not only there, but the Nisqually has already done a piece,
So
and
you-
we'll be
you will-
able to show it's
You
successful.
will hear the next item on the agenda is I believe, an incredible program and an incredible opportunity for this partnership, but more to come on that.
Okay.
Next
And
item, please.
Just on a quick note on that, I did look at, on the Nisqually Tribe's website on this, and it looks like they've already gotten some state curb money and Public Works Board money for this. And I know that the state broadband office currently has their grant applications open, and one of them is for matching dollars for federal broadband money. So I'm not sure how much federal money has gone into this, but all of those things will need to be looked at, and then determining what the new ask is of the state beyond those fund sources.
We'll touch base on today on that as well. Yeah.
Okay. And then the next one would be providing funding to accelerate the work that's needed on the Nisqually River Bridge. The new modeling is showing that the flood risks are much more imminent and critical. There's a lot of sediment that's moving, and so again, we would want to make sure that, and I know that Romero is working with the shared partnership group, but we would want to talk about what kind of federal asks are we making? Is this in the state transportation plan as we move forward, if there's new revenue? And then just make sure that we're all coordinated on that one.
This is an item the board has included in past legislative agendas, and it's related to the overall I-5 corridor from the Nisqually Delta all the way south of Tumwater. And you've seen some modeling, so that TRPC, where they see how much the pinch point has moved from Pierce County to Thurston County. And related to the bridge, the Nisqually tribe has gone through a good analysis and have seen the migration or the change of the river, because right there is a pinch point where the delta occurs. So eventually, based on their study, the river will swing so bad that it will take I-5 out regardless. And I think it's probably projected in the next 40 years for that to happen. But also maybe a long time, and on our lifetimes, 40 years, but getting a project like this moving, it also is going to take a long while. So I'll be working on the shared legislative agenda that's with all the jurisdictions here in Thurston County, and I know this will continue to be a centerpiece of asking the legislature to continue to fund. They already funded a little bit of the study as well as the portions of the NEPA process. But we need to start getting into the point of designing the structure of the Nisqually Bridge replacement. Anyways, so that's the rest of the story on this.
Maybe just as a follow-up to that, Department of Defense is very interested in this accomplishment as well. So I know our federal delegation is on board. I think it's just a matter of time and it's going to happen with all the players that are pushing in that direction.
And you're right, this year we submitted a request for funding to the federal delegation. That seems to be a little of a black box because we don't know where that goes. I guess no news are good news, but we'll continue to find ways, and I encourage the board to continue to make this a priority in the legislative agenda.
Yep, I think it is.
Okay, and then the last four bullets on this draft are ones that are more general in nature. And we know that there's going to be asks from WASAC on some of these also, but the climate change strategies one, the language is the same as what we had for the 21 session. There will continue to be discussions about climate change, and so I would encourage you to look at that wording and see if you're still comfortable with that.
On that one, I mean, I would like to see us be a little more specific in what we're advocating for. I will ask the Climate Action Steering Committee, I don't think has settled on a set of legislative priorities, but I will bring this to that next meeting. You know, a lot of good work has been done, and I don't know if the focus is now going to be on electric vehicles or, you know, like, but I'd like to kind of, I think it's more meaningful if we're advocating for kind of the most impactful specific change, not just saying, you know, help us with climate change. It's, you know, it's better than nothing, but I'll see if I can propose something a little more specific, working with the Climate Action Steering Committee on that.
And I know that The legislature did pass CETA, the Clean Energy Transformation Act. Also, there's still discussion about building decarbonization. The greenhouse gases from buildings is a big chunk of our greenhouse gas emissions, and so that might be a focus area.
Yeah. Okay,
So what I'm hearing as an umbrella with the specifics, would you like to include this on the agenda? An item related to climate change.
we previously, just for Commissioner Mejia's background, we previously voted to do that in response to a set of asks from TCAT where they said, hey, you guys are working on the climate mitigation plan. Looks like everybody's, gonna pass it. You funded it. It was like midway through. And they were like, if there's some easy things, why? This was their argument. It was like, if you know you're gonna pass this, in the next year, and there's some obvious things that are gonna be in that plan, why not get a start on them now? Why wait? And so one of the things they asked us to do was to prioritize in our legislative agenda. And the board didn't agree on everything on the list, but that was one thing that I think all three of us, Hutch and Commissioner Edwards and I, all agreed to include that. Now, again, that was for that year, and we're a year or two down the chain, but just so you have that context of how that got put there to begin with.
But I think, to Commissioner Mentzer's point, I think it would be good to kind of narrow down, and I feel like with TCAT, that might be an item that, you can bring back. I don't think it needs to be a huge discussion item for us coming back, but just kind of listing out, these are the priorities that, TCAT would like to be focused on next year.
Once I get a sense, I'll bring it to the board for you guys to.
Yeah, that would be.
I do want to make one comment about the reality of this in this time. The price of gas by the time this legislative session comes into being is going to be astronomical. It's going to be about $1.50 more than it was last year at this time. The price of home heating oil and natural gas is also going to be way up. There's going to be a lot of pressure on doing something to fix, that's the reality of what's coming for this session. So how that all fits together as far as accomplishing the goal at this point in time is going to make it a little tougher than say last year, just as an example. That's all.
Yeah. Okay, let's go on to Blake.
Okay, so we know that even though the state did provide some funding to counties to alleviate some of the costs related to resentencing and vacating convictions and reimbursing LFOs, it wasn't enough. The WASAC and their affiliates are asking for specific information from counties about, what are your costs, and then want to go back to the legislature. We have heard from Senator Rolfes, chair of Senate Ways and Means, that she is planning on putting something in her budget to do that. And so we don't know what that number is. She doesn't know what that number is. So we're working with Juliana and others in order to provide them with the appropriate information so that we can make the ask. And then we'll see if that gets into the Senate budget and maybe the House budget also. But that's going to be one of the asks, is to provide adequate funding to cover the full costs necessary to address the State v. Blake decision.
I just feel like on this one, I keep saying this, and I don't know if anybody agrees with me, but I don't believe that there's going to be the LFO reimbursement that's projected. But I also believe that the impact on the court system is going to be substantial in terms of all that, we've seen it at this board level of asks that we need more people to process cases, et cetera. So by the time, how long, when did Blake happen? We've been dealing with this for like a year, right?
Early this year.
Early this year, because it came in.
Early this year.
Yeah.
I mean,
It feels like a long.
it feels to me, I'm predicting that within a fairly short amount of time, we will know, we'll have a much clearer idea. Because the lawyers will have combed through the back, the cases and sort of created the backlog, of who's needs, how many cases. We'll have just a much more precise way of guesstimating the cost based on the number of cases involved that are actually going to come to the courts. Not just in theory or or just, pulled out of air, but more specific. So I'm hoping that we can just really dial this number in to something that's really specific and defensible and gets to the true cost of kind of what Commissioner McGee was saying about judicial impacts. Not trying to ask for stuff that's really not going to come to fruition, but asking hard for the stuff that is with hard numbers underneath it. I feel like we've had enough time. Patrick's shop and John Thunheim's shop should really have had time to go through over the course of this year and knowing how many cases are really going to come through the system as a result of this.
They don't, and the reason they haven't is resources. They haven't had the resources yet to do that work. I think that in the next 6 months, that they might have that, but.
Yeah, maybe, but defendants, as a former public defender, I can tell you that people sitting in jail, they really don't care that you don't have the resources. The calls are coming in, everybody is calling, and Patrick's smart enough to be logging that stuff and saying, we've gotten, 37 calls a week over the last, 50 weeks. We have a sense of who needs their issue addressed. And it's not just speculative, it should be more numbers behind it. I mean, maybe not as good as we hope or would like, but it's gonna be a lot better than it was 6 months ago where we were just going, everybody wants to say the sky's falling and worst case scenario, we're trying to be protecting ourselves. But I think we'll be more effective if we're not just taking that kind of stance, because I know if I were a legislator, something happens and everyone's saying it's going to be worst case scenario, and it's really probably not, and so there's that dynamic, and I'd like to just be really specific about this and aggressive, but anyway, I mean, it's kind of obvious, but I just feel like this has gone on long enough, and I know there are a lot of works going on, and maybe Thurston County, maybe another county, maybe other counties have dedicated more resources to trying to ferret out the percentage of cases that are coming back, and we can use that as a way to try to predict exactly what we need to make ourselves whole. Because, I don't think, Deborah can correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure we're only going to get like one more shot at this, right? Like the legislature was acting in the wake of this bombshell. And now everybody's going to kind of dial in the numbers and the asks, and the legislature's probably going to do one more thing to help us, and then we're probably done. We need to get this right.
What's WASC's position on this whole thing? Are they kind of in line with what you're doing?
WASAC, you mean?
Yeah, I mean WASC, yeah.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I don't know.
Yeah, I think they're gonna be including that as part of the legislative agenda for WASA.
I don't know what their methodology is, but they are definitely prioritizing this.
Yeah.
We talk about it all the
So,
time.
I think if anything, the board may consider really having this on our agenda to support that effort. And you understand what he's saying in terms of what is the actual dollars and cent number of cases to count Thurston County, but this is a general support to the WASAC effort that applies to all counties, something that we should continue.
I agree, one way or the other.
So there might be a way to approach it though, that isn't just give us this much money. If we were to set this up to be reimbursable under extraordinary expenses with more guarantee than we get for the murder cases, but that would give the legislature some, I don't know if covers the right word, but if counties were to just come forward with the costs that they actually incurred, after they incur them,
Especially on LFOs.
that would get away from the sky is falling, worst case estimates, and still guarantee to counties that we'll be paid for what we spend.
Yeah, that's why I
So
thought it should have always
that's
been
an
that way.
option of how to approach it. Not ideal, but if we find we're gaining no ground.
Okay, so what I'm hearing is include this and the details will.
I think so,
Well,
yeah, we need to.
well,
Yeah, what I'm saying really has nothing to do with the language on this form. It's more just, I was just bringing up the
Because I think
issue.
when the legislature convenes, things will change. And I think the approach it will change as well. But I think fundamentally, it's something that we should continue to support.
More to come.
Yeah.
Right, and the amount of data that the AOC has asked for reimbursement of this aligns with what we would have to do for extraordinary expenses.
Okay.
Next,
Okay. And then also, we know that there's a focus that the state has in terms of doing more to address mental health, behavioral health issues, substance abuse issues before incarceration. And so there enough adequate funding has not been provided for counties to do this. And so the request would be to ensure that counties get more money, because counties, the state in general is moving in that direction anyhow, but there's not adequate funding for facilities, for staff to operate those facilities, that kind of thing.
I mean, that's kind of a no-brainer.
The biggest, yeah, I agree. And the biggest issue for, Deborah, you're not involved in this one, I don't think, but because it's the BHA has a different, person they work with, but that ITA court cost issue is a really huge one for the region, and it just seems like fair. I mean, it just seems like we could get traction on that. I mean, it's just unfair what's going on, and it eats into our ability to provide the crisis response and all the services. This is the idea that we have to pay for the ITA court costs, and it comes completely out of our state allocation for non-Medicaid services. So as all these new hospitals are opening and they need new courts, it just continues to erode our ability to provide all those other services. And then it just seems to be something that, like, if anybody sat at a table, they'd have to agree with that that this isn't really fair or logical, but it's just been a, I don't know if we want to get that specific and try to back the BH ASOs on this issue, or just keep it general like this, but I just wanted to raise that one because it's the #1 issue on that side of the ledger.
I think it's just leave it at a high level because we really don't have any specifics asked, but I think highlighting the importance, at least from the counties to the legislature, there's an important item, you should consider including it.
I know it was on the association that I forget the name of it. It was presented at the Wasac LSC meeting. It's on their legislative agenda, which is the organization of the different behavioral health groups. And I glad to see that because we worked kind of hard on it my first year, and then last year it just kind of gotten ignored. Meanwhile, the issue continued to grow on the ground. And I want to see that issue come back to prominence and hopefully get some traction with it. Anyway, but everybody seems to be in agreement that's important. Yes? Okay.
And last but not least is the support for clarification for the new police reform laws. And I think that you've heard there's really a need for the legislature to clarify some of the intent of this particular law. And I know there's not just Thurston County, just about every single jurisdiction of the state is looking forward to do this, and just have that as an agenda item, I think is adequate.
The only thing I would throw out is, do we want to say specifically with respect to mental health crisis? I mean, I know there's other elements that they'd like to have tweaked, but the clarification element seems to be around, does it supersede the statute that says that they can assist with involuntary treatment detentions?
Maybe we can align this. I'm sure WASPEC is, I'm sure they have this item on their legislative agenda, and maybe we can coordinate that, but at a high level.
Yeah, I think that's important. I think that we don't want there to be unnecessary hassle because the laws are ambiguous as to how they interact.
Okay, so as you may recall, the legislative packet has, 2 areas. It has specifics and some of the overall support. We'll go through and split those. So what I have is the the Veterans Assistance Levy as well as the Developmental Disabilities and Mental Health levies should be included. Related to the broadband, we're going to have a conversation here in a minute with the Nisqually tribe whether that is an element or an item we'd like to include the funding for the Nisqually River Bridge, and I will bring the details as a result of the conversation with the shared legislative agenda. Related to the climate change, Commissioner Menser is going to be approaching the climate action team.
Climate Action Steering Committee.
Steering Committee to see if we can have specifics as to what they ask will be. And then as an overall, we'll include supporting funding for the impacts of the state versus Blake, and also increase funding for mental health and substance abuse disorder, and certainly last but not least, again, to support the clarification for the new police department. Did I miss anything?
Is that about the right number of the elements to
Yep.
include?
I think that's probably the right number. So let's work. I'll work with Megan, and then she's going to help and just format what we have, and then we'll circulate for review, and then I'll bring a final draft for the board to consider.
Okay, anything, Deborah, from your end? Anything further for us?
No, that's it. The only question that I had was, I'm happy to stay on for the rest of this meeting. Do you want me to hang up from here and then just listen in as a member of the public, or do you want me to stay on?
It's your choice, really.
You can stay on. I think you can benefit from the next item on the agenda, the broadband project in coordination with the Nisqually.
Okay,
Right.
thank you.
Thank you, Deborah. Appreciate it.
Okay, so should we move right along? Then we've got a guest, I know, for our second item, which is the broadband project update. So let's just go right into that.
Yeah, you will hear today, Commissioner, as a presentation from the Nisqually tribe. I believe we have on the screen John Cushman. Forgive me if I butcher your title. You're the planning director for the tribe. We have Paul Walk. He's a consultant to the tribe. And obviously we have our best, Jenica Machado. She has been coordinating behind the scenes all this. And this is the presentation you will see is leading to what Deborah Manguia, who is to the tribe, submitted for a grant that is coming up. And I believe provides great opportunities for the county, again, to partner with the Nisqually tribe on this particular project, not just on the application, but also in the long term. And also at the end, I'll have you a letter of intent for this potential partnership with the Puyallup tribe that should be included as part of the application that needs to be submitted next week.
I do have a question on that.
Yes,
By any chance, is the port going to be involved in this in some fashion as well, and maybe put forward a letter of support like we have?
Yeah, so you will hear we have a form, a broadband group, what is the broadband action team, and they will have many members on the broadband action team. This is specific to a project.
Okay.
Okay. Jenica, you'd like to start with some comments, or go ahead.
Yes, thank you, Romero. And so I think, Romero, you set that up nicely, that this specific conversation and what Paul Walk will go over is for this Washington State Broadband Office grant with the pre-application that is due October 18th. But it is embedded in a larger conversation of partnership with Nisqually on broadband projects moving forward also. And so I'd be happy to turn this over to Paul Walk. I believe he has a PowerPoint presentation to help provide an overview of what the project for this October 18th application grant would look like.
You should have access to share your screen, Paul.
Jenica, I gotta bring the PowerPoint up. I sent it over. Compared to.
You've got to have better than that.
Hey, Paul, can you hear us?
Yeah, are you able to hear me?
You're a little bit muffled.
a bunch muffled.
They're quite a bit garbled to the audio.
Are you able to hear me now?
No.
It's not great.
You may consider logging out and logging back in.
Yeah.
That could,
I'll try.
That worked yesterday with a meeting we had.
Okay, give me 1 second.
Good to see you again, John. John?
Joe,
Joe, sorry, I apologize. I
that's all
can't
right.
see all the way from back here.
Yeah,
Did you
yes,
see
good
that?
to see you too.
maybe in the meantime, Joe, if you can clarify your role with the Nisqually tribe. I think you're the planning director, correct?
Yeah, I'm in charge of planning and economic development, and one of the projects we've been building up here over the past couple of years is broadband. We do have a kind of a team. Paul's on the team, Mike Mason, our econ director, myself, and Chris Olin, our IT director, and then of course our administrator, CEO, and tribal council. We have done a project out here already. We call it Fiber to the Home at Nisqually, and we have got broadband to all the houses and facilities on the reservation. We kind of realized, working with Paul and talking to our neighbors out off the reservation, that there's a need for this. So we started to talk to CURB and to the county and to the port and to the state, and we have put in some other funding proposals to try to do broadband off the reservation. And I don't want to get into Paul's presentation, but we've been learning as we go. It's pretty exciting. I told the council a year ago I knew nothing about broadband, and now I know very little more, but I have a good team around me, and so we're able to make things happen. Maybe I'll mention real quick, we do the state broadband office pre-application is due Monday. And I've already submitted it, but I'm going to resubmit and include the letter in it. The complication here is our tribal council is going to have a broadband briefing Tuesday morning. So I don't know if I will have the signature on the tribal side for that letter when it goes in. I'll try. I'll talk to the chairman and see what he can do. But it's all teeing up pretty well, and literally every week we are scrambling and checking funding opportunities and updating stuff we've sent in and rechecking our numbers. And the opportunity to work with the county is really exciting. I hope this really becomes something that we can work on for a lot of years. So that's probably enough what I've said now.
Thank you. Paul, can you do a sound check?
Yes, are you able to hear me now?
I think it's a little bit skipping.
Maybe you can call in on the phone or something.
I wonder how we can probably get your audio. We got obviously the PowerPoint up and running, but your audio is not as clear as we would hope to have it.
Let me try one more thing.
Paul, do you want me to try to walk through the presentation?
Yeah, is that any better?
Not really.
Just a little bit, but it's still kind of an echo.
Yeah, we don't want to have to be guessing what he's saying, I don't think.
Yeah, you got a call-in number. I can call in instead.
So let me give you my cell phone number. So you can call there.
So another trick, if you will, to save bandwidth, people will turn off their video
Oh, yeah, that
and
works for me.
audio improves, and he would still be able to share his screen.
Do you hear that, Paul?
Yes.
maybe close your video, and just go with audio, and then you can share your screen.
We need better broadband, I can see that.
Making his case.
That makes a difference, though.
You can also call into the Zoom. He can call the Zoom. The Zoom invite has the number on it, and I can send it to him again right now.
Oh, yeah, you can call the Zoom with your phone, so the feed will go through. I think that would be better.
And share his screen on his computer. He just
And
needs to mute himself.
so do you have a cell phone number and the number you can call into the Zoom call?
Yes.
Why don't you let's try that, and then we'll have you on both. The audio via your cell phone, and then the video via the PowerPoint presentation. Have to be inventive into this Zoom universe.
It's crazy that we all know, try this, try that.
Please enter the meeting password, followed by the
Who's that?
You are in the meeting now. There are five.
What's the Zoom people talking?
He would just want to mute his computer audio.
By pressing *6. You have been added to the waiting room.
Hey Paul, can you close your audio on your Zoom? I'm muting you with your cell phone. So now can you mute on the regular Zoom account?
All right.
All right, are you able to hear me now?
Yeah, much better.
Okay.
Okay.
Romero,
Yeah, wonderful.
Wonderful, I'm
Talking to
talking to you on 200
you.
meg connection, and that's still what we have.
Paul, could you mute on your Zoom connection, your regular Zoom connection, and just use the audio via your cell phone? There you go.
There we go, how's that?
Perfect.
there we go.
No, much better.
Yeah, really much better.
Okay, I think
So
we're,
what I was trying to tell you is I have a 200 meg connection symmetrical, and we still have these issues. So, this is just kind of a telling story of how much broadband is actually needed today. If you have 4K screens, you're pulling a 100 meg connection right there. If you're actually getting 4K resolution, and we're coming out with 8K resolution shortly. So, the bandwidth requirements are just going to continue to rise. I had to disconnect my computer because I have 4 monitors. And, as you can see, that would drain my broadband right there alone. So at any rate, thanks for having us here today, and really looking forward to this conversation. I think through talks with Joe and the tribe, we see there's some really good benefit into working together. And I kind of wanted to start off discussing the grant that's coming up through the WSBO, and some of the requirements that are in there. And I know that Joe has already ran through this, and he has a pre-application submitted for us just to get the prior approval, and then we have to have that final application in by 11/29. And so there's a lot that has to be done still in order for us to be prepared for that. But some of the things that are being called out as priority is a consortium of entities working together. So one thing that the tribe has done, and I know Jenica is aware, and some of the other stakeholders that have been involved in the broadband action team at the county level, is that we've been working with Wave Broadband, and they have committed to XGPON on this project to every subscriber that we are able to connect to. And we're guaranteeing a 5 gig by 1 gig connection to each subscriber, but that XGPON has the capacity to go up to 100 gig to every subscriber. So it's really a future-proof network that we're designing here. And for those of you that don't know, I do a lot of waves engineering and permitting, so I'm heavily involved in how their infrastructure needs to be built. So this particular grant doesn't have an open access requirement in the beginning, but it does have an open access requirement after, I believe, 5 years. And this is a 25-year commitment. So when we're talking partnerships on this, just to kind of start off, I want everybody to understand that there's a 25-year commitment inside these grants for any partnerships. And that's where we have to outline who does what, whose responsibility is what, and so forth. But again, for 25 years. So not a short-term commitment between parties. So created this slideshow just to kind of go through where the tribe sits currently. And just to start off, for those of you that aren't aware, the tribe has formed a communications construction division. I helped them form that company back in 2017. The company does aerial and underground fiber optic construction services throughout the state now. We are the primary construction company for Wave Broadband throughout the region. We are also their emergency restoration company.
Hey, Paul.
So the tribe has, yes.
Paul, could you use the
Yes.
slideshow mode on your presentation so the public can see it a little bit better?
Yeah.
Thank you. There you go. Thank you so much.
No problem. So what this is detailing is showing that we have directional drill capacity and we have aerial crew capacity. We have multiple of each crews. Our guys are out taking care of pole transfers and pole installations as well as the underground construction throughout the state. So we've created a company that has the capacity to do any kind of fiber optic construction that's required for infrastructure. We've also created something worth noting, a training academy that trains people in the underground directional drill. It certifies them on the directional drill, certifies them on the mini excavator, teaches them how to install conduits, manholes, and so forth. Because we have found that human resources is it's a rich commodity nowadays. So we're having to make people that we can't find. And I think that's something that's going to come into play and something that the overall group needs to be aware of if looking into getting a partnership going, is understanding that while there's money out there prioritizing broadband and the construction companies are out there, these construction companies are all operating at a high capacity right now and having a hard time keeping people in play. And the next thing is the actual materials. Something that a lot of people have been paying attention to is, fiber optic is now, if you haven't ordered it, your fiber optic cable is pretty much sold out. Well, it is sold out from all your domestic carriers through 2022. So luckily we put in some very large orders to make sure that we can accommodate the construction that we have on the agenda so far. The next slide just details Wave Broadband and the agreement that we have with that provider. And we do have a commitment letter from them that states that they will guarantee access to all subscribers up to 5 gigabits per second for residential subscribers by 1 gigabit up. And just to give you an idea of what that is at a cost structure, without promotions going, they are doing a 1 gig access for $69 a month. Something that I've had the opportunity to do in the last couple months is survey some of the people living in the Little Rock community. And through Comcast, they are receiving 25 meg for $69 a month is what their average pay is out there. So to go from 25 meg to 1 gig is obviously a huge jump. And there's several small businesses, farms, and even a library and a school on this particular first grant that we've identified. So being able to increase that capacity at a substantial discount for what they're currently, they currently don't even have access to it, but part of the grant requires us to look into low cost solutions. And so that $69 a month may not be a high cost for some, but Wave does offer solutions down to the 20 meg area where they can get down to $20 a month. So it's really a sound solution, we thought, for working with us on this project. This is just a slide detailing how Redline and the Nisqually Indian Tribe have been working together. We're 4 years into this now. So far, some of the things that we've been able to do is we engineered, permitted, and constructed a fiber optic GPON fiber to the home network on the reservation, serving all of the tribal members. They each have gigabit access to their homes. So that's something we were pretty proud of. We worked with CURB on funding that project, and it took us 13 months from initiation of the feasibility assessment to completion and turn up of the project. So on a timeline perspective, it's pretty much unheard of. And the fact that we were also constructed that with the tribe's construction company was a proud moment for all of us, as well as completely taken care of from within the tribe itself. So Redline oversees the construction company, put that in place for the tribe, and we've done feasibility studies for Lower Thurston County. We've also done a feasibility study for a technology center on the tribe, and that is actual part of another grant that we've submitted to fund that building. And we've worked towards this project of building open access throughout Thurston County. And this will actually take us to a connection with the Chehalis tribe, where something that, as far as I know, has never been done before, where two tribes are sharing a fiber optic connection and sharing emergency services, cultural education, telehealth, and telemedicine solutions. So once again, proven how diverse these networks can be. And the Chehalis tribe is now working with Grays Harbor County for the opportunity of continuing that effort throughout that county and up to connect to the Quinault tribe and others. So it's been a very interesting dynamic of events that have taken place in the last several years, and I'm honored to be part of it. The NTIA grant that we've submitted, we're calling it phase 1 of the project. It's where our first feasibility outline showed us that we should be constructing to. Part of that feasibility and a major part of that took into account the access to the Chehalis tribe. So we do have a grant pending that is outlined on your screen that you see here. That grant is 42 miles of fiber and will connect 1,200 residential subscribers. I believe the initial count was 13 anchor institutions and several small businesses that I can't quote just off the top of my head. But this project has been completely surveyed, pre-engineered. The engineering budget has been produced. All the permits have been identified and is truly shovel ready. We have access to the supplies. In fact, our yard has all of the equipment necessary to build this particular run on hand. So we're as shovel ready as you can be. And so we're expecting to hear back on that grant sometime this month, we're hoping. We've already had initial contact and communication. So crossing our fingers that this one is successful. The second portion of our NTIA application leaves from the tribe heading north. And what you're seeing represented here, green is existing fiber that the tribe has already put in place, covering their fiber to the home project. And blue represents aerial construction that needs to take place on poles, with red representing underground construction. This is part of the pre-engineering analysis that details what needs to be done. And we've already had communication with the city of Lacey on permitting and initial conversations that Jenica put forth for us with Thurston County Public Works Department on what's going to be required there as well. This particular grant is connecting multiple tribal residents, tribal anchor institutions, and businesses, and ends at the Marvin Road property that I'm sure everybody's familiar with, that the tribe owns and is in the process of starting to develop. So having fiber optic services out there was important to be able to service any development in that area. This slide represents what we are currently going after from the Washington State Broadband Office. This grant is right around $7 million, and we are connecting 860 homes, 12 farms, 7 businesses, a library, and a school. And this area has been surveyed. This has all been pre-engineered. Again, blue is aerial and red is underground. What you're seeing in red represents the primary reason that these homes are not served already. And I can back that up to the previous slides as well. Comcast is pretty much the primary provider out in this area when it comes to broadband. And what they've done is when there's aerial pole lines available, they will access those and provide broadband. When there is not, they provide quotes to the customers in that region and ask them to pay for the infrastructure builds. So just as an example, at the top of your screen, you'll see some red lines with some laterals built off of that. That community was given a quote of $320,000 to build just the main line. That did not include the laterals that you see off of that. And that was what they're asking to be responsible for in order for Comcast to come out and deliver services. And this is something that if we start working together, you're going to see take place throughout the county, as these red lines are going to become more prominent in areas of unserved. And the main reason for that is the cost. The cost of attaching an aerial line versus an underground line we call it 1/3 in the industry, but it really can work out to be about 1/10 the cost for aerial versus underground in the industry. It really depends on the ground conditions. Obviously, if we have to go through a lot of cobble and basalt, glacial till, that's going to raise the cost of underground construction versus a pole line that's already there. However, pole lines are more, they're easier disturbed through windstorms, through tree branches, through car accidents, through squirrel chews, rodents, just more maintenance involved with the aerial versus the underground, not to mention an annual fee for attaching to the poles. It's a part of a maintenance fee that's collected by the pole owner. So once it's in the ground, your responsibility is just to maintain that. And once it's in the air, you have the cost of maintaining it plus the additional cost for being on the pole.
Good, Paul.
So just things to consider. Yes.
Got a couple questions at this point.
Paul, you have that great slide, the aerial photography there. And I know that we see I-5 and Highway 12, here in the room, we know more or less that area that you're talking about. But for the benefit of the public, can you describe a little more specific the area all the red lines and blue lines are proposed to be as part of Phase 3?
Yeah, so down lower is just above Rochester. That's the upper part of Rochester. And the green line you're seeing there is what the Nisqually tribe has already received funding for between CURB, now will be PWB as well. And so that line is, if you continued east with that green line, it would actually connect to the Chehalis Tribes project. So just north of Rochester there is what you're seeing represented in the lower portion. And as you go up north, you're going to be hitting 105th Avenue Southwest, I believe. And can't remember the name of Delhi Hills, or at any rate, Delphi. And in that area, we have about 13 letters of support already from community members, as well as the elementary school up there, and it's spreading to where we are. I receive about 5 emails a day from new people in that area complaining that they have no service whatsoever. So we didn't have time to add everything that's still coming in today because I had to go out there and do site visits, look at ground conditions to do the pre-engineering. But we do have additional areas defined around that top red area, about another $3 million worth of construction identified already that just needs to be verified. And that's without us going to anybody. That's just people coming to us at this point. So the other thing I could do, if you wanted more detail, I could load this Google Earth image up, and I could zoom in for additional detail on this if required.
I think we're okay. Commissioner Edwards.
Paul, are you aware of a hookup that was done some years back trying to connect all the health departments around the state of Washington with fiber optics to provide a broadband system that was supposedly for the day exceptional. Are you aware of any of that?
Yes, I know there was quite a few initiatives going forward like that. There was the one for the health departments, and then there was one for the schools and libraries. And they have funding existing today still to connect those anchor institutions separate from these grants. And they're available on an annual basis, such as the FCC's E-rate funding that connects schools and libraries. It's just a matter of the way that they're designed right now. It's the schools and libraries or the health department that has to make the application for the funding. And the applications are not very simple. And they can hire a consultant, but they cannot consult with a provider that has access to bid the project. Once those projects pass through E-rates and are accepted, they go out to bid. And the service provider will actually build the network and own the network. And they'll have a maintenance contract for 5 years on that network. And then when that 5 years runs out, they either go back for additional funding or they try to fund it themselves at that point. But these are nothing new. They are in existence. And so what we're trying to do is really, I think personally, the focus really needs to be on the residential community as far as where these dollars should be hitting. If there is anchor institutions that we find that are not serviced or do not have good service along the way, great. But coming from somebody that's been in this industry for 23 years at a senior level, I know that when you're overseeing a communications company, you put a lot of attention on these anchor institutions because there's a much larger rate of return on those customers. So you will see fiber connecting those buildings while they completely bypass residential communities along the way, just because the return on investment was not there.
Is there any mechanism in place that you would be able to, I don't know, utilize that hook into or something in areas where it's already in place, I guess? I'm just wondering if there's an efficiency issue that we could utilize or help others make application for the grant or something. If you can't do it, what would the process be to help so we could utilize that already existing infrastructure?
So I think it comes back to awareness, and that's something that the county can be part of, is just, I think it comes back to this digital education that they're trying to get out for digital literacy. Something that we can focus on, and there's even funding for that, is to create some sort of a digital literacy program that helps these institutions understand the processes outside of them going onto a website and trying to navigate themselves, because these are difficult processes to navigate these grants. And every school and library and institution that I'm aware of has hired consultants to navigate the process. And in some instances, providers will come in under the scenes and assist them go through the process as well. But really, I understand what you're asking, I believe, and I think that there is a way that we can create something to create more awareness on how to navigate that process.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, keep going. We're good. I think that was the questions we had.
So one of the things that grant agencies prioritize is they all do a mathematical equation on your builds, and they ask, what is the cost per home passed? And on this particular grant, they're asking, there's priority given to projects that identify less than $10,000 per home passed. And we've demonstrated in this project, by the time it's done, just a little over $7,000 per home passed. And really, we were able to do it on this one, but there is areas where that's not going to be feasible. And it's something that I've been talking to these grant agencies about, is there's a reason that these areas continue to be unserved. And it is because of that ROI. And if you're asking people that are trying to come in and solve a solution to stick to the old ROI process, these people are going to remain unserved. So I think it's something that they're starting to pay attention to, and something that I had to bring up was just a couple runs that I was aware of where we had 10 homes within a mile. There was just no way with those 10 homes within a mile all being underground that we can meet that criteria. So hopefully that'll be changed, and that's something that we can look at going forward if we have a consortium. I guess would like to go into a little more detail on this particular grant, some of the things that I identified in ANOFA. Digital equality is something that they're giving preference to, and we can achieve that digital equality by providing that tiered level of service with a priority on, financial feasibility. So providing the lower rate of service at an affordable rate is how we can achieve that. But we've also talked at the tribal level about creating a flyer that will go out to each of the subscribers that gives them some information on how to access GoToMeetings, how to access telehealth, telemedicine, cultural education. So to try to help them with this digital literacy issue. So we are making efforts on this end. I've been working with the tribe's IT director on how we can tackle that challenge. There's also a 10% cash match is what they're asking for, but we can apply for a waiver. And the waiver just needs to show that we really don't have the financial means to carry that burden. There's also an in-kind contribution that's offered up in this that we can meet. There's tribal consultation that can be utilized as part of the in-kind. There's preference to regional projects. And I think that's really, if we're all coming to the table today and saying, what is the true benefit of the county working with the tribe and working with Wave Broadband, is we have a regional solution that we can offer. And as long as we have the resources to go out and survey the areas and pre-engineer them and make them truly shovel ready, having a consortium of a county working with the tribe, working with a service provider, is just a no-brainer. It's the best case scenario for the constituency. They're guaranteed that the project will work, basically. And how that structure plays out that's where it goes beyond my ability to have input. This is where the tribe and the county will be making their arrangements, and Wave Broadband would be coming in as well. But I strongly encourage this because of the amount of funding I see coming down the road, and how this will benefit and impact the opportunity for success within our county. I already mentioned that the operating agreements are for 25 years, and the grant ceiling is $25 million. So grants are between $1 and $25 million. So while this particular grant, we have already pre-engineered and are shovel ready for that $7 million. If we were to have an agreement in place by round 2 of the WSBO funding, we could get closer to that ceiling, I believe, in that grant with a viable solution that has a high likelihood of success. The BAT letter of support is a requirement. If there is a BAT in place, you have to have a letter of support from that BAT for this grant. So I kind of just wanted to make Jenica aware. I reached out last week to kind of touch on this, but it is a requirement. So I know that we have MOUs out to those different stakeholders before they can act as one voice, but it's something that we should make haste on if possible. And then we also have a requirement to coordinate with the existing communications providers. And we've already sent out certified letters to CenturyLink and Comcast with no return. This is something that we've done for prior grants, so we were not expecting any different. But it requires 2 attempts. So Joe, just FYI, we have to send one more batch out for a second attempt to make sure that we're in compliance by the due date of this grant. And our last correspondence has to be sent within 30 days of application. So that's something that we should go ahead and process immediately.
That's for this state broadband grant.
Correct.
Okay, well, we'll need to do it today, right?
Yeah. Yes,
okay.
Yes, please.
We can do it. All right, I'm writing it down. Good. Maybe, let me
So
make,
at any rate, Joe, maybe you can give them an outline of what we have applied for to date, total.
We have applied for,
That's the item for,
we've applied for 4 curb feasibility studies to look at these unserved areas, and that includes our tech center project. We got a curb combination grant loan for the fiber to the home on the reservation. We have a curb grant that we submitted last month that they approved for $2 million. It'll be matched by a state Public Works Board proposal we have in for about $4 million. And that was to make the run to Rochester, I believe. This grant goes in to build north of Rochester. And we're also waiting on the NTIA grant, which includes some of those components also. And Paul, I'm glad you brought up the BAT letter. Jenica, if I was just to be careful, that letter should be included in our application. And is there anybody who is authorized to sign on behalf of the BAT?
So the BAT has discussed using a unified letter of support and has agreed that once we have the final MOU signed from every party, that we would be able to do so. And so Paul and I have discussed making sure that we have that done by the grant deadline.
All right. Well, the deadline is Monday.
I believe Paul, please correct me if I'm wrong, that it will be due for not the pre-submission deadline, but the the full grant submission deadline.
Okay.
Yes, by the time that we have the actual application in play, it'll be required at that time, along with any agreements between any consortium that's in play, operating agreements, ownership structures, things of that nature. If we're shooting for this particular grant, those would have to be identified by the grant deadline as well.
Yeah. Okay. Maybe let's talk about it later. Maybe. Okay. All right.
So the following slide is just an overview of everything that we have pending to date. And the reason that there's a portion of this that we identified as phase 1, which leaves the tribe and heads through the city of Lacey and Olympia and Tumwater and down Old Highway 99 to Tenino. While that is showing blue for aerial, we have 2 applications in. Actually, we have an application in for all underground on that path, and then we have a backup application in for aerial. One funding agency had more money available, so we hit that one with the underground with a backup for the aerial. We've already received funding for the aerial, but we have until March to decline that funding should we receive the funding from the NTIA to go underground. So again, I want to put emphasis on, there's a large amount of work that has gone into what we've done so far. For this particular project, we're about 3 years in, and this is what we have surveyed and pre-engineered to date. The large county, the tribe has interest in supporting and building as much of a network as possible throughout the county. This is not something that they're into as let's go after this round of funding and walk away. We see that there's a lot of reward in building this out throughout the county. The tribe also understands that this is not a big money maker. Building these networks, these networks basically sustain themselves and give you a little extra cheese on top. There's not a whole lot in them outside of that. So the commitment from the tribe is commendable from a perspective of community support. And that is something that I think they've really shown an outstanding focus on lately. So at any rate, partnering with the county, I see this network being able to grow at a faster rate than what the tribe will be able to do on its own. And I also think it's important that there be a steering committee on this. And that was outlined in the feasibility assessment, that the importance of having community leaders being able to add input or to make sure that their portion or their region is connected. Each municipality, county, or township will have an understanding of what's coming down the road within the next several years in their community, and they can offer up their input on what that is, and we can make plans with tiered priority lists of where the funding will go next. I think that's going to be very important. So that's pretty much the end of my spiel. If anybody has any additional questions, I would do my best to answer those.
Additional questions?
Any comments, questions, commissioners?
No, looking forward to seeing it come together.
Yeah, and while this presentation was going, the board has signed the letter of intent. So Jenica, Katie will be sending you that copy, and hopefully we can get the signature from Ms. Qualified by Monday, so we can include it on the grant submission.
Okay, thank you.
Grants.
Pre-submission.
One comment, Jenica, I noticed, I think, a typo in the letter. And I sent it back to you. Did you catch that?
It is not on the version that the commissioners have.
Okay.
I did receive that, I think, during the meeting.
Okay. It's kind of an important typo because it talks about being served or unserved. And let me just open it up. It might be worth making that change.
Yeah, Joe, we'll work it out.
Okay, good. Thank you.
We're sitting here for the next couple hours, so
We'll work it
re-sign
out.
if we need to.
We'll work it out.
All right, great.
Okay, thank you so much, Paul. Thank you, Joe. That was excellent. We're excited about what's coming down the pike. Happy to be a partner with you guys.
Right.
Okay, we'll be in touch. Thank you all. Thank you, Jenica.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you, Jenica.
Ramiro, where are we on the ARPA funds?
ARPA funds?
Because didn't we set aside an
Yeah.
amount for broadband?
Yeah, you set aside $5 million.
Just sitting there.
And I'm gonna be coming for you to request to release a portion of that so we can start conducting a survey.
Okay.
So that might be coming up to your attention. So as we move along, the practice that I'm going to practice is not to release everything, but just small portions to begin the process and see how that goes. So you will see a request coming up.
Take a break.
Yes, sir.
It's 10:30. We'll reconvene at 10:45 with item 3. Okay, we're back, 10:47 a.m., picking up with item 3 on this morning's Commissioners Planning Session agenda for the Thurston County Board of County Commissioners, October 14th. Item 3 is Citizens Budget Advisory Board discussion. We have some handouts in our packet, and I'm imagining that I'm looking at the Assistant County Manager. No?
Yeah.
County Manager.
So, and this item is, we're not expecting for you to make a decision. This is something that you need to have a conversation. I know there was an interest for us to bring this matter, or to begin the conversation again. And again, please don't feel that we are seeking your direction to form a budget committee, considering that we're in the midst of budget preparation. But because it's going to take some time, if that is the objective of the board, and the implementation of something like that, has to be very well structured. I mean, at least from my perspective. And if that is the case, they would have 2 years at least until we can get something up and going, if that is the desire. Here's, Robin did an excellent job last year, overall in terms of some of the benefits, and also we reach out to other counties to see what they do. You have some documents related to that as well. So, and again, I think there's always a pros and cons on anything the board may consider. And the important thing is whether there's value related to this that you probably need to consider as we move along the process.
So this is a presentation I did for the board, as Romero said, about a year ago, when we were considering how to engage people in the county in the budget process. And I think that one of the most important takeaways in this packet is on slide number 3, and it's the spectrum of participation. And really what this slide is saying is you need to know what your public participation goal is. What's the goal? Because based on what the goal is, there are various ways that we can engage the public. If we're going to go to the Citizen Advisory Committee, which is an exciting thing to do, then the goal is to collaborate, where you're actually partnering with the public in making the decisions. And you see a great example of that in the TST Advisory Committee, where the committee actively takes all of the requests related to the treatment sales tax and goes through their own kind of analysis. They examine how the money is being spent currently and also weigh in on, gee, should you continue doing what you're doing? Is that getting results? Is it worth what you're paying now? And then how would you deploy new resources? That is ideally how a budget advisory committee would work, where they're not necessarily making the decisions, but providing advice, in-depth advice to the Board of County Commissioners, because the committee is spending much more time on that aspect of the budget than the board. The downside to a budget advisory committee is that they are labor intensive. The TST Advisory Committee, it's a very small focused area of county government, and it takes 1.5 FTEs to just do that small thing. So if you decide to go down the path of a budget advisory committee and you want it to operate in a sense like the TST Advisory Committee, I would hope that you would approve additional staff for your budget office to be able to support the committee and manage the effort, because it would be a much greater full year commitment than what we have today. Now, we can scale it back. Again, it's important to know what your goal is. If you don't want that kind of in-depth review, then we could do something lighter that is not as labor intensive, but you wouldn't get the same value out of it. So it's a balancing effort. I've provided a few things for your reading pleasure, if you will. This is the GFOA best practices on public engagement in the process. Again, know what you want, decide on the purpose of engagement, and then encourage people to engage. There are a number of various ways to do that. And then I found it very interesting when a former county manager, Don Prep, went to Clackamas County in Oregon. He told me that there they have the citizens are an integral part of the budget process. And that Oregon state law requires that there be citizens on the budget committee, and they're part of actually making the budget decisions. And if you look at Oregon state law, it requires that there's an equal number of citizens to the number of either commissioners in this case. So we would have the 3 commissioners and there'd be 3 citizens on the committee, and you make decisions. The committee makes the budget decisions. I thought that that was very interesting, so I pulled out the pages of the Clackamas County, their current adopted budget, that just talks a bit about the budget adoption process that they use and how this committee fits into that. There are many, many examples of budget committees across the county. Not across the county, in counties across the nation. So in addition to Clackamas in Oregon, here's the budget committee for Chesterfield County in Virginia. Just a little bit about how it operates and what its purpose is. It's an advisory committee. It's not built in like Oregon has. And then I have a number of other things here. This particular issue of the Government Finance Review has award winners for the budget program from 2019 and how they engaged and set up mainly tools. This wasn't a budget committee as much as it was electronic tools that gave everybody in the county an opportunity to weigh in. So there's tons of examples here. I also brought, this is a report from May 2008. I didn't give any to distribute to you, but I would certainly make a copy if you'd like one. In May of 2008, the Thurston County Citizens Task Force on Budget prepared this report and submitted it to the Board of County Commissioners.
Is that in our packet?
No, if you would like a copy, I would definitely give it to you.
No, I just didn't see it in there.
And with all due respect to the members of this committee and the county staff who ran it, it was not terribly useful, because what the board at that time is, you can see, they were just about to descend into the Great Recession. And they were looking to this committee for advice on what to do with their budget, as you get from the TST committee. And that is not at all. What this committee basically said at one point was, we do not have enough knowledge to make budget recommendations to the board. So the way this was done is not the way to do it. They had some interesting ideas. I see in this some practices that were very popular at the time about bidding for your budget, true zero-based budget, which, by the way, the sheriff does not do, and some interesting recommendations for the county that the county didn't find valuable enough to implement. So I will give you a copy of this report, but know that it didn't really go anywhere. So again, you need to know what your goal is. And then if you're going to have a citizen committee on budget, you need to invest enough to make it effective and make it work. And to get the real value out of it. So I'll make sure you get a copy of this.
Can we do it like in a specialized way if we were to do it? This is just a question where there's financial people like accountants and
What do you?
like, like the Historic Commission has
Designated seat.
a designated seat for.
Someone with a financial background.
Yeah,
Specific
some-
set of skills, yeah.
Somebody
Sure.
with a.
Some counties that I've looked at do have the membership, there's a requirement to have some type of financial experience. Some counties, the website says flat out, no experience required. Some of them say we're going to go in depth in every bit of the budget, and some of them say you'll just get high level information. And again, it's all about as a board, what do you want out of it? You've got to know what the goal is that we can work toward
Yeah,
when we
that
establish.
is absolutely pivotal and important. Because that will allow us to manage the expectations of this committee. Because if we have a clear goal and objective the board is looking for their feedback, they can provide a lot of perspectives, suggestions, and the board says, well, I don't like it, and then what is, and then we get into how we manage the expectations. If we have a committee, that perhaps the board may not consider the recommendations. So it's a lot to think about this, and again, there is nothing that I'm expecting for you today, only in the last page of this packet.
I saw you read that Lewis County
The
one.
Lewis County, and this is a perspective of the clerk of the board from Lewis County. And as you can probably see from her perspective, it's very loose. I mean, it's just, just the, not very well structured from her perspective, I don't know. But it's a lot to think about this. We can probably bring this item as we have the opportunity to read all the documentation, put some thought behind it, and then next year's and one of the initial planning sessions, we can start having that conversation with you. Related, what is the purpose and intent, and what is the value that you're seeking if you choose to, if you decide to have this committee in place in the future.
I kind of brought this back because I remembered Robin's presentation, and with due respect, I kind of felt like when we presented it, I felt like you weren't, I didn't get a good sense of whether you were a proponent. And then I learned about the Lewis County had one. So I asked Thomasina to kind of, what are they doing down there? I mean, that's our direct neighbor to the south. So she kind of had some conversations with some of the people down there, and they were pleased with what they were getting out of their committee, even as loose as it is. So then I started to talk to Robin about it, and then Robin seemed to be more excited about it and so with that and learning about Lewis County, I thought, and a new commissioner, I thought maybe the board ought to hear this again. Because Commissioner Edwards, you're always talking about building trust, and I feel like we've done well, this could be something that helps that. That's my thought about it,
So at the time I presented this, my concern at the time was that you'd tell us to stand up something right then.
Okay.
That's what I didn't want.
Uh-huh.
It was August, and we didn't have time for a full-blown committee,
Yeah.
which is why this says it ends in options for this year.
Oh, yeah.
At the point in time that we were at, these are the things that we could have done. We could still, even as late in the game as we are, post a simple interactive website and get some citizen feedback before you make final decisions in 2 weeks.
Well, my interest
But-
was building something for the long
Right,
term.
Right, but I'm just, that
late
was
for that.
my hesitation last year, is that someone would say to stand up a committee for that budget, and that would not have been possible.
response because we went out to the citizens and some participated in terms of, if you have this much money, how you.
400
Yeah,
responses.
so how you will spend, and now the many different areas that we had on justice and everything. So it was an interesting result, and I believe that is included in here in that
Yeah.
packet, because that was an attempt to go out to the community to the survey. And it was interesting because if you have this much money, how you will spend based on these areas.
I really believe that if we're gonna do it, it needs to be like the TST group, that level of knowledge and they're obviously they're not participating in decision-making, but that second step of collaboration where you're getting direct, kind of input, and they learn enough to really be able to assess. Because it's not, I did some of your interactive tools before I was a commissioner, and when you don't know, all the different, it's just impossible. Like, most people don't even know what, they don't know what lanes county government operates in. So if they see, you're spending 75% of your general fund in the law and justice system, well, I don't want 75% of my money spent on the law and justice system, so that's too much, and then they'll send it to some other area. Well, they don't understand that, that's a primary responsibility we have. It's not,
Mandated.
we don't have equal, they're just thinking government, and we're thinking county government. We have specific roles that we play. It's not just, there's certain things we're not responsible for that are very important priorities, are just things that the cities do. So it's a hard exercise to get anything meaningful out of if people aren't quite knowledgeable about the budget.
Right.
So I think you either have to kind of go big or not do it, is kind of was my sense of it, but.
Yeah, I guess, maybe to follow up that, I think citizens out there, they just don't know what they don't know. They're well intended, but, I see the new Board of Health, that's coming through state, mandate, if you will. And I think I'm sure that's what the intent is to try and get a little more expertise and whatnot in the involved process. We've got the TST, the Planning Commission, we've got those folks that, and I think those are both mandated by the state, aren't they?
The TST Advisory Committee is not mandated.
Oh, it's not?
That is something that the county chose to do.
Okay.
Yeah, we stood that up. When I had the TST program, Barb Berger and I stood up the advisory committee in 2012 or 13.
It's a pretty good example of something that works, I think.
It's excellent.
Rather than.
And I could see how, everyday stuff, citizen engagement, great. I could see how if the county was trying to substantially change direction, or the community felt that the county should change direction, or let's say you faced another great recession and you had to make cuts. In either of those, then I think you'd see real value to the commissioners to have citizen input, because those are just decisions that are very hard to make.
Right.
And having the citizen engagement and support for those really hard decisions, I think would be really valuable. When you had to start, let's say we had to make 15% cuts, we're gonna take heat on no matter what we do, but having citizens right there who are educated and can weigh in on that would be great.
Thanks for coming, sir.
No, well, I'm just, you know, in doing this, I think you have to be careful you don't get special interest groups that are trying to get their agenda, and those are the people that are more interested than everybody else. I've sat through quite a few of these budget sessions, if you will. Robin puts on something where, you know, the elected officials kind of respond to questions. You get people that come in and ask questions, but that boils down to about one people.
I know, you just don't, which is why I was so excited to get 400 responses to that little budget slide that we did online. It was incredible amount of participation when we usually see 2 or 3 people show up.
But even that, the demographic that I most represent never sees that stuff, you know.
Because it's online.
Well, older people,
Yeah.
you know, I mean, they're not there, you know, so you're not getting it, but yet they're the voters. And so I think there's, you know, trying to come up with a balance. I have to say, I know Mr. Pettit can be challenging at times, but he does seem to know quite a bit about budget. He's been willing to come forward and put his point of view in place, you know. And then there's,
He's our one-man.
he's kind of our one-man community that comes forward. And we've had other folks, and I know in other jurisdictions, sometimes the elected officials and even department directors have had they've developed their own little cheerleading section, if you will, to participate in the budget process. They'll come in and say, well, we want to do X, Y, or Z. We agree with this, you know, director or elected official that they need more of this or that. But again, they don't understand the complexity. They don't know what they don't know. And so it really makes it tough to discount what they're saying or disregard what they're saying. That certainly doesn't build trust. It's, you know.
Yeah. Like a great example is like parks, you know. Like you can imagine a whole parade of well-intentioned citizens saying, we want more money for parks.
But they
You know what? So do I. So does everybody at this table.
Right.
But like they can't, like it's not just
Because
about,
connecting the dots is complicated.
yeah.
And you know, Mr. Pettit does take the time to review and
Yeah, he does a lot of work.
He reads and, you know, and provides an opinion as he should. But another citizen, perhaps the interest may not be in just trying to connect the dots, if that is the right word. But going back to the Citizens Advisory Committee, you know, it's one thing is for you to identify the value, how we manage expectations, but also strike a balance between the requests you get from offices and departments and the policy level requests that you have right now. This much money you have available. How are you gonna be balancing that since the offices and departments considered to be the experts in outlining their needs? How we introduce feedback from the Citizens Advisory Committee with the whole process, you know, it could be challenging. It could be challenging.
True. But
Most people
I mean,
have no.
ideally, if I were to have, you know, unlimited resources and can structure this any way I wanted to, I would have a committee that was large enough to do four, maybe 5 subcommittees. And I'd break them up by strategic plan areas. So you'd have one committee on law and justice, you'd have one subcommittee on economic development, and one on not public works, but public health. You'd have these subcommittees that would specialize in an area. There'd be the overarching committee where they'd come together and understand revenue, and the subcommittees would come up and do reports, so it'd be a joint report to the board. But each of these areas would have a few people that would really dig in to that sector and have presentations by the offices and departments, much like TST does. And you'd split it up that way bring it up and give a recommendation to the board. There would have to be enough tools though, so that these wouldn't be the only citizens looking at these areas. You would also stand up a tool like Balancing Act is a fairly popular and inexpensive tool. I think Pierce County is using it. So Balancing Act would be an online tool where we could push out both education and a budget structure where people could weigh in. It's a more sophisticated version of the budget tool that I used a few years ago. So you'd have that, and you'd have some town hall meetings where you talk about these areas, much like the one that I participated in last night that's being run on state tax options. So there'd be an opportunity for people to actually come who don't engage online. They could come in person, and this advisory committee could hear from them. So there'd be a few different avenues that it would work on. But again, this is a staffing thing. You'd need at least 2 more FTEs, if not 3, to be able to run this thing and do it well.
I believe that. TST is a good example, I think, about it. It worked, you know, but it took some commitment to make it work. Yeah. And even there, I'm not sure that you end up with a broad spectrum of the community's involvement. Very seldom is somebody on there that says, I don't want to do a damn thing about that, you know, kind of bring it down. I mean, like Commissioner Menzer and I disagree on maybe how to accomplish something. I think we might have a similar goal in mind, but if you don't have that balance, I think it's detrimental to the process if you can't get balance in there. And I don't know, I mean, the TST, I think they do good work and their heart's in the right spot, but I mean, I don't always agree with them, but I'm trying to go along with the concept because I mean, that's what that 1/10 of 1% is for. Right. And I don't see enough treatment in my estimation. I want mandated treatment, you know, when it ties in with the whole homeless thing and all that. So, because I don't think we're ever going to get ahead of it on voluntary treatment. They just don't participate. I mean, I've seen that in my whole career where alcohol even, when it wasn't all drugs and stuff, a lot of alcohol issues. And seems like when the court gave us the authority, okay, you're going to mandate this person take antabuse. And if he doesn't, going to be in jail. Well, you had a good hard option there. And that was the encouragement that that person participated. They certainly didn't want to be in jail. Okay, I guess we're going to report to the station every morning at 5 and whatever before we go to work and take it daily. Well, we don't have those options anymore. For some reason, those options got away. So we don't have a total package. I don't think we'll ever get a total package at this point. Anyway, so I think Mr. Pettit's the closest thing we've got to scrutinizing what we're doing, because quite honestly, the media doesn't pay any attention until there's some controversial thing that, you know, I mean, I guess if we jumped up and screamed and stomped our feet on the table or something, maybe we'd get more attention, but I don't know. And the public, they're so darn busy. I mean, just like service clubs. Service clubs are having a hard time getting enough people to participate and do the things they've always traditionally done. Because everybody's so darn busy, I guess. They're just having a hard time. And I see that here. If we tried to stand that up, TST, okay, it worked. And there were a lot of people that were affected by mental health and drug problems in their own personal lives, probably, and professional lives. And I think that's what maybe made that work. I just don't see enough participation. There's no point in having a one-man committee, you know, and you want balance in that committee. So, I don't know if I can go for committing a bunch of resources when we have such limited resources anyway, because I value Mr. Pettit's input. I don't always agree with him, you know, but I think it's valuable input. He does study it, pay attention to it, has his perspective. I think that's great. We won't always have that.
If he could dial back the threats to remove people from office and take everything to court, it would be more helpful.
I think it would too. Yes,
Not everything, not
yes.
every mistake is, you know, a basis for recall.
There's a lot of people out there that have been the victim of government in one fashion or another, and I think that animosity is hard to overcome.
I think I know what you're saying about you said two things, I think, and one I don't have an answer for. The first part, like, I think you were saying kind of makes sense. It's like if you've got a specific issue committee, then the people that are gonna wanna spend the time are people interested in that issue.
Yeah.
So like with treatment, it's gonna be, nobody who's against treatment's gonna sit on a bunch of meetings just to be the naysayer every time. But I think that's not necessarily a big of a problem with budget, because budget goes all different directions and everyone's kind of got an interest in it. I think you get a more balance, kind of like with planning commission, you know, you get a broader swath of people that would show an interest in the general topic than something like a climate action committee, right? Or a treatment or a homeless response committee. You're gonna get a certain type of person that's super interested in solving problems in that area.
Yeah.
Everybody's interested in a balanced, fair budget. So I think we deal with that. The other thing about just not getting enough people, that I don't know that I have an answer for that, if you think that wouldn't be enough interested citizens.
Well, and again, they'd just be people that have an agenda, I guess, that's all.
For me, what I'm thinking about, I mean, for us, this has been the time commitment of it. Because right now, and especially this time in the world of Zoom, where I feel like we're just being bombarded with so many things, and you know, I feel like there would be an interest, but once it came to the nitty-gritty of like
How much time
you're gonna be, it's gonna be a lot of like people where they're gonna be like, okay, I did this once and I'm out. I can't do this again for like, especially for these voluntary, unless, you know, like you're retired and, you know, you have the time for it. But if you're working all day and then you're coming home to like a 2-hour session, and it's, so I don't know what the time commitment would be like. I'm just looking at it from my perspective of being the new member here, and right now it's been like, you know, Monday through Friday, we're talking about budgets. And if this is gonna be an advisory group, I'm gonna imagine that they're gonna have something similar to this. And so like, what's the time commitment going to be like for people that are gonna be volunteering? And
Lewis said 35 hours or so of meetings on their side, and I mean, and I thought what you just said is exactly why when this came up before, I was kind of like, yeah, it's too complex.
Yeah.
We're not going to get anything meaningful because they won't be able to get the education level that we have about all the nuances. Seeing though how many other counties are doing it and good reports about it is what made me want to kind of revisit it, because it's like, well, it's working somewhere,
Right.
and so it's got to be able to work. Well, we know that it works. It can work.
It works very well in many places. The TSD commitment is substantial. So it was surprising. It's been surprising to me how many people apply to be on that committee, where we spell out the time commitment quite plainly, and then how many people show up and stick with it for a number of years.
We added seats, right?
Yes, we did
Just
add
to accommodate
seats.
really good applicants.
So, they do a full day. I know we do a half day at least once a month. I think it's a full day, as you come into budget, once offices and departments have submitted their budget proposals, it steps up to a couple of days a month, and then they hold extra meetings, I think, to be able to come to a decision timely to give to the board. Carrie has been an excellent manager of the process. She lays out the year, just like I do for you, she lays out the year for them. Again, having sufficient staff to support a committee like that is essential, but it is a big time commitment.
You know, just yesterday I mentioned this on when Kurt did his presentation, you know, we're out there trying to reach 500 volunteer citizens in the EFT process in each one of those individual fire districts. And they are just having a heck of a time getting adequate personnel to be volunteer firemen. And a lot of it has to do with so much regulatory stuff and commitments, and people not being able to make those commitments. And I think if we were gonna do something like that, you almost gotta have some minimum commitment to make sure that they kind of get all the scoop, if you will. Very few people are as knowledgeable as Mr. Pettit, I'll say, about this issue and the way county government functions. And where are we gonna get that kind of commitment from those folks that maybe aren't activists, if you will, for one reason or another? You know, I don't know.
So at one point I thought, and I think that things have evolved to a point where this wouldn't work anymore, but at one point I had pitched to a Board of County Commissioners, let's build this with the Thurston Thrives committees. Because at first, they were structured in a way that it was just a natural fit to start to bring them strategic plan and budget and have them comment. But that has evolved in such a way that I don't think it's a
Initially,
option.
it probably would have worked. Maybe.
Oh, it would have been beautiful.
Yeah,
It would have been and I tried very hard to make that fit. I adopted those maps. It would have been a really nice evolution that just, I couldn't get any traction from the board at that time to want to go into this process. I've brought this, as you can tell, I've brought this idea forward a number of times. But I think that you do have citizens who are willing to devote time like that. I think that Thurston County is almost uniquely situated in Washington State, being the state capital. You've got citizens who are extremely experienced in finance and know how budget work. If you wanted to have like some number of the committee have a financial background, it wouldn't be terribly hard to recruit people with that kind of experience in this county. I think that you could do something really incredible around this if you're willing to resource.
Having the right balance on that, and having, I mean, even the way we do our appointments to our various boards and commissions, if you think about it, they're not totally responsive to the individual appointing authority. I mean, the way we're set up. Maybe I'll make a recommendation from my district, but my seatmates might say, well, I don't think that guy's gonna fit. Well, but that might have eliminated my philosophy in that particular board or commission. And somehow there has to be a way that the group doesn't get stacked in one philosophy. I guess if you really want to have balance and if you want to have trust, I think there's a piece that goes along with that.
We set the TST committee up that way where there's some members have a law enforcement background, some members have the public health background, some members have a mental health background.
But there's even differences there if you truly want to get balance.
True,
I mean, you could say,
You
you can have.
can't vet people's
you can't-
philosophies as a
Well,
criteria for.
you can't, no, but I mean, if you're really looking for, if it's up, and I think this is gonna be easier to do when we have 5 commissioners. I really do, because we're able to carry on a conversation now, you know, because we've kind of got an open agenda here. But when we have 5, I can say to you in the hallway, hey, what do you think about this person? You think that'd be okay? I can't do that now, you know, and so we could have not open discussions, but discussions more like the legislature has right now amongst, and across the aisle amongst individuals. I hear about it all the time, you know. they're sitting on the budget committee or something, and you got the two co-chairs or something like that.
Well, they're gonna say things individually in the hallway they might not say on TV. And I think it'll help when we get 5 commissioners. I think there's gonna be a better possibility to do some of this.
So I really think that it's, you know, I'm gonna bring you back again. The most important thing that you could do is, as a board, decide what your goal is and what the outcomes are that you're looking for. And then we can build a committee however you want in a way that will achieve whatever that goal will be.
My biggest concern is 2 or 3 FTEs required to support it. I mean, I'm not willing to do that at this juncture, but maybe that'll change in the spring when we see how things, I don't know. Ramiro, did you?
No, this is good conversation, and again, you know, but as all of you just discussed, there's many complexities with standing a committee like this, but also I think it provides some opportunities and challenges. So please read all that information to you, start building a little bit of perspective, and I will bring this item next year during a planning session to see where you want to go. If there's an opportunity for you to start developing some value added that you may want to get out of that potential committee.
Okay. All right, so that.
Yep, that's all I have for you.
So it's 11:30.
Yeah, you don't have to.
Commissioner Edwards and I have we have a 12 o'clock meeting.
12 o'clock.
So we might have time. I'd like to maybe break at 11:45. I've got straight
I don't have any
through.
other items for you, Commissioner.
But if we have a commissioner item or two that needs addressing, we got a few moments.
I do.
Go ahead.
And this is in regards to something I've been working on. And yesterday, while we were doing the treatment sales tax, it became even more apparent to me on the need of it, as I saw several requests for program managers and coordinators for several programs. I've talked to Ramiro about this, and this is specifically to 2 options, or 2 trains of field here. One is to, and I know this has a lot of work to do with the courts and all the stakeholders in it, but just maybe a proposal to kind of put all the treatment courts under one and have one program manager handle all of them. That way they're not competing for grants at this level. I feel like it would also create kind of more of a direct entry for defendants who are trying to access them and seeing where they fit in this. As right now, I feel like the approach is very kind of siloed in each kind of treatment court they handle. So that's just one suggestion. I'm going to be reaching out to Leah and talking to her about this. And then another.
Before you leave that one, I mean, can you just better articulate, like, what problem are you trying to solve with respect to?
Well, right now it's, first of all, it's all the program managers and site. I mean, it was pretty obvious as we had a couple of them in the treatment, you know, that several requests from these treatment service courts asking for all these different program managers. I feel having
Like we're spending too much money inefficiently.
Yes.
Because they're siloed out.
Yes, and I believe it was actually one, what Carrie mentioned, that one person was like, well, we're not funding managers, we're supposed to be funding treatment. And I feel like that kind of hit the nail on the head too, where, and I feel like, you know, this program manager could be kind of the same basis as a, you know, pretrial services under the governing board. That way they would, all the stakeholders would kind of have a say, and they wouldn't lose control of how the treatment courts are working. But that's just a proposal I'm working on. I wanted the rest of the commissioners to kind of know.
No, I kind of think I'm there, and it was kind of, I was glad to hear the county manager talk about that we're working on something like kind of consolidating you know, pre-trial, post-trial, whatever, probation, a bunch of things like that, we could get some efficiencies going instead of duplication so much, you know. And so it sounds like you're kind of headed in that direction for a solution, aren't you?
Well, I think it's a couple of, and I think I briefed individual commissioners on this a little bit, of the idea that have been working for over a year is the future of pretrial services. And the future of pretrial services is we know, I mean, Marianne has been extremely successful in reports to the Pretrial Services Board. But I think it provides an opportunity as to how we can envision pretrial services in the future to expand the abilities, the capacities to the system. And we talk about the EHM as a tool, for instance.
The what?
EHM.
Yeah.
And you had a request from district court for you to consider funding a program like that, somewhat of a subsidy. You know, and my point was, you know, I think it's more, because if that is a tool they can probably use, you know, a pre-trial and perhaps post-conviction. It also that goes back to supervision and how supervision can be managed as a system-wide as a whole. So, and also to that event, we're going to have a work session with the pretrial services and a workshop board to start exploring those ideas. And I do believe I have my own perspective that eventually I believe the pretrial services, or whatever future name of that department will be, should be as a report to the under the county managers with the board's direction. So, and I have already broached that subject to the members. There seems to be a little bit of an interest that we can explore that. And you know, by having as an independent department similar to the Office of Public Defense, it provides that a little bit of that separation with all the law and justice individuals. So that's where you're referring. I think I mentioned to you as well, and we're going to work through that. And if we see any opportunities how we can enhance pretrial services, I believe they are. I will bring that back to you.
Yeah, and I think there's a spin-off benefit of that's going to be jail population.
Right.
Yeah, a big piece of it. So I think we're headed in that direction.
Next item, you had another one?
Yes, and then adding to that treatment court, another project that I know Ramiro has heard me talk about it a couple times. I've done a lot of case studies that Sarah has helped me with. It's in regards to homeless court. And I've talked with a couple out of jurisdiction courts, both district and superior courts, who have a homeless court right now and how they're working it. And I think it would be beneficial for us to look at the aspect of setting something similar to that here. And I'm not sure if it would go under the district court or the superior court umbrella. It would just depend, I guess, kind of like what the goals were. But I've garnered some interest from the city of Lacey, for example, and the Strophe Foundation seemed really interested. So just heads up. That
Does it look like community court in Olympia?
So,
or is it different?
So that was one of the questions that came up. And so, no, it looks a little bit different. So it was one of the questions I asked one of the courts where I was like, well, you know, like community court is setting something up similar. Like, you know, is it same, different? And it's different. So, and with the several case studies that have been done, there has been aspects where they've kind of approached it the way the community court is going forward. But in the higher courts where there's, you know, especially superior court, it has been approached different ways just because of the level of the criminal activity, I guess I'll say, you know, since it's a felony. So, yeah.
So I did, when you brought this up, I reached out to district court and just exploring that idea. Judge Barker at that point was not necessarily opposed, but really someone lukewarm. And his reaction was probably, what would better be fit on this concept? And he revealed to me the City of Olympia was in the process of standing something like that, parallel to the community core they have. But I don't think never materialized in terms of determining the purpose and intent. The purpose and intent, for instance, in drug court, is an individual who has gone through, committed a felony, and they're willing to get into a program. And if they're willing to get into this program, then it's diverted for a potential going to jail, right? And a homeless court, and that's what I got stuck myself. You know, where would be the objective? An individual who's homeless commits a felony. What would be the option that individual will have other than jail? Then is the social services effect committed with that? What will be the outcome of that? So it's a lot of conversation that perhaps needs to occur, because again, it goes back to the drug court example. You have an individual who goes through drug court treatment and they graduate, right? And then they graduate, they have met all the many different steps for them to consider to be sober at any given point. What will be the outcome of a homeless court? So all that, I think, we'll continue to explore. That is the direction, but yeah.
Is there a particular jurisdiction that's doing this that you know of, or that's nearby?
Yeah, well, Spokane County is doing it. And then there was, I forgot her name, she actually interviewed for a position here for Superior Court that was kind of similar, where they were starting up the program and they had done it for like a year. I have to remember the court, I apologize. Or the county who was doing it, but it was close to the area. And I've looked at case studies, that was, Spokane County was kind of like the one I focused on in Washington, but there were cases done in California where it was being like very efficient, and just the success that was coming out of that was pretty impressive, so.
What those liberals in Spokane do, though, isn't necessarily going to apply here in Thurston County. Just kidding. Commissioner, what you have a commissioner's item?
Oh, boy. Well, when it comes to homeless, I don't know about it. I don't look at homeless particularly as something that needs the court myself, but
someone's got to order them into that mandatory treatment.
Somebody's got to get, but that becomes when they've committed a crime of one type or another, even a minor crime. Or look what happened under the bridge here last week. You know, we got a major crime, another murder. Geez, if you read the facts of that murder, how'd you like to have your family walking by that activity? And those people, you know, they're from out of the area. We're still encouraging people to come here from out of the area. Now we talk about homeless and it's spreading. I point to that out on Highway 101 there. When you take the ramp to get off here, we got a new homeless camp started there. There's garbage.
Commissioner, do you have a new commissioner item for today? We've heard this one.
I know, but I want to do some. How come nobody? We say we've got somebody in Tom's shop that goes out and makes contact with these people and see if they can get them in a service or something. I don't see that happening. There's a good example out there that's been there now more than a week. And it's just going to grow.
The one you were just mentioning on
Yeah.
And I think it's, you know, the problem also has to do with jurisdictional boundaries. And you have that is state's DOT right away. That is within the city of Olympia. So it becomes a little more complicated. And the whole conversation, if I may, of the state having be a proactive player to vacate homeless camps from their states right away. That was explored 2 years ago at the state legislature. It was a bill. The legislature was going to direct DOT to vacate. And there was a lot of opposition to that because they would have pushed it into the local jurisdictions. So, and that's probably some of the challenges that we have. The city of Lacey, I got into a contract with the State Department of Transportation last year. And it was located in one of the home, I can't, yeah, it was on the interchange. And what they agreed at that time is the city of Lacey will provide enforcement. And the enforcement was not to, vacate that area. The enforcement was not to allow anybody more to go in.
Well, let's.
So, so.
Okay, well, I'm just gonna point out that Friends and, where all the RVs and stuff are parked over.
Inside?
Ensign
Ensign Road?
Ensign Road is a good example. We're trying to work as a coordinated effort with others. I'm quite hesitant about trusting that Olympia is not gonna, I don't think they're gonna follow through. I don't trust them. But here's another example. If they were really interested in solving the problem, they'd have somebody out there looking at that. They're not interested in solving the problem. They're just not. They're coming in a whole nother garbage. Go by there and look. I mean, the garbage is already thick out where this new process is taking place. You first see it when you go out by the Drevick property there. You know where that is? Right here at the end of the road. Then you parallel the freeway for.
Oh, right up here on the hill?
Yeah, right up here on the hill.
Okay.
Whomever has cut the fence, and that's how they get in and out. Now there's homeless carts, grocery carts starting to stack up there. And I just don't understand why we don't do something to make it uncomfortable for a citizen to just arbitrarily move in on a particular area and take over. And then another person comes and another person comes. We've already had situations where we had a murder down in Rochester that stemmed directly from that kind of activity taking place on an intersection. And then pretty soon we got a grandpa in jail and a family disrupted. And I'm not saying he should have shot the guy by any stretch of the imagination, but that's what it went to. And it causes all kinds of other societal problems if we don't address these things. And we've got Wheeler. I mean, I'm not trying to fix Wheeler over there because it's such a mess that I can't hardly believe it, but I'd like to see something stop this from happening. And if we've got intervention people, either working with Keeley or Tom or whomever, get over there. I brought it up at our Tuesday meeting. I didn't hear anything back yet. But again, it's just a few days ago, I guess, that I brought that up. But something needs to be able to take place here. And we are the Board of Health. If it's gonna be a health issue and there's rats running around there, I'd like to do something about it. What that is, I don't know yet. But if we've got people that are getting paid a lot of money, we're spending about $10 million on homeless stuff already. Some of that's going on staff that should be able to do something constructive. That's kind of where I'm at on all that stuff. I got a couple more issues, but we're out of time. We always run out of time. Huh?
Okay, yeah, I appreciate that, because I gotta be on, so do you.
Yeah.
Right at noon, and just a couple of things I have to get done. So let's adjourn the half-day planning session here, and we'll be back tomorrow with budget at 9, right, 9?
Yes, 9.
The assessor. We're